In the Badlands of Wyoming, investigators uncover huge bones.
Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. All the way, yes!
And a set of footprints 66 million years old. Clues to the most fearsome dinosaur of all time, the T-Rex.
This is a monster from a child's nightmare brought to life.
7,000 kilos of flesh, bone, and muscle. The Tyrannosaurus Rex terrorized the prehistoric world, but its life remains a mystery.
They're actually a really, really weird group of carnivorous dinosaurs.
Now, new discoveries from a unique site could shed light on T-Rex's secrets. Buried bones and laser technology reveal the terrifying reality of this predator and its prey.
T-Rex was not just some brutish monster. It was a highly intelligent animal.
My gosh, is it scary. This is the scariest tooth that's ever evolved.
To solve the mysteries of this extraordinary lost beast, we'll travel to a time when huge predators roamed the Earth. Reconstructing T-Rex's massive body will reveal how it grew up to become the king of the dinosaurs. Dawn in the Badlands of Wyoming. A team of paleontologists heads out to investigate a unique site just outside the small town of Glen Rock.
Everybody out, grab a shovel, or pick.
In charge is Dr. Scott Persons from the College of Charleston, a paleontologist with a lifelong passion for dinosaurs.
I've been coming to Glen Rock since I was 12. But I came out here and I loved it. And I've been coming out here pretty much every summer since.
Scott's on his way to a dig site that lies in a layer of rock called the Lance Formation, one of the greatest concentrations of dinosaur fossils in the world. 66 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous period, the remains of a huge inland sea covered much of Wyoming. Its muddy fringes created the perfect conditions for preserving dinosaur bones.
It's a great place because it's a spot where we've got not just a tremendous abundance of dinosaur bones, but other kinds of fossil sites too.
In the late 1800s, competing teams of adventurers scoured this landscape, hunting for the most extraordinary fossils. Their rivalry became known as the Bone Wars, and it unearthed many enormous dinosaurs.
Absolutely enormous.
But there was one beast that these early paleontologists prized above all others, an animal whose remains still draw scientists here today.
This is prime Tyrannosaur territory. The northern landmasses, Tyrannosaurs are #1.
66 million years ago, the dry Wyoming Badlands were lush forests. The ruler of this world was the most terrifying dinosaur of all time, Tyrannosaurus Rex. As big as a bus and weighing in at around 7,000 kilos, T-Rex has captured our imagination for centuries. But despite its fame, much about its life remains unknown. How did it rise to dominate this world? A clue could lie with footprints preserved in the Wyoming mud. Scott and his team are here to investigate one such set of ancient footprints. They bear the telltale signs of a tyrannosaur.
So you're looking at 3 deep toe impressions, 1, 2, 3. And you can also make out a well-defined heel pad at the back. This toe up here is particularly well preserved. You can see there's a large fleshy pad there, and then it ends with the indentation from one long, sharp claw.
Scott thinks a tyrannosaur left these prints when it walked along what was then a muddy riverbank.
If if you look closely, in addition to the footprints themselves, you can see that the rock that they're left in has this slight undulating pattern to it. Those are ripple marks left by the mudflat environment. So 66 million years ago, we were here on the edge of a coastal estuary, and in the mud, the dinosaurs were walking around. They left many, many, many tracks, but occasionally the conditions would change. The sediments would harden up, they would have the opportunity to completely fossilize.
Dinosaur footprints are very rare. An entire set is even more special.
There are about 3 Tyrannosaur trackways known in the entire world. This is the best preserved of all the tracks.
Scott plans to make them immortal by using a laser to create a 3D digital copy. Scanning the trackway will give Scott the ability to take a perfect digital copy back to his lab, where he can study it in detail and discover if it was left by the most famous tyrannosaur of all, the T-Rex.
Tyrannosaurs are a group of big carnivorous dinosaurs that show up very late in the age of dinosaurs. They're characterized by having incredibly deep jaws, very thick teeth, really, really wide skulls. We hope to learn, first off, how big it was.
There were several species of tyrannosaur, but it is the awesome size of the T-Rex that makes its fossils prized around the world. Steve Brusatte from Edinburgh University is one of the world's leading experts on tyrannosaurs. At the National Museum of Scotland, he examines one of the biggest T-Rexes that ever walked the earth.
T-Rex to me is the ultimate dinosaur. It would have been the largest pure meat eater that ever lived on land in the entire history of the earth. This was found in Hell Creek in Montana, and this is enormous. Just look at the size and the scale of this animal. This is a fully grown adult T-Rex. It was about 12 or 13 meters long, so about 40 feet long from the tip of the snout to the tip of the tail. It would have weighed about 7 tons. This was an enormous apex predator dinosaur.
Paleontologists have discovered that much of T-Rex's body shape and posture evolved to accommodate its most potent weapon, its huge head.
This head is about the size of a bathtub. This is a front-loaded animal, and that head is so big that if it opened its jaws wide, I could nestle inside of its mouth. And you can see all of these teeth lining the jaws. There's about 50 teeth in the mouth, and the biggest ones are about 1 foot long. So this is a monster from a child's nightmare brought to life.
With a head this large, T-Rex needed a huge tail just to stay on its feet.
That tail was a counterbalance. It was like a seesaw, so that that big head wouldn't tip the T-Rex over, that it wouldn't fall face first.
It walked on a pair of the sturdiest legs that ever evolved.
The legs are massive. This was an animal that weighed more than an elephant, but it only could walk on 2 legs, and it was only those toes that touched the ground. T-Rex was like a tiptoer, like a ballerina.
T-Rex footprints, like the ones in Wyoming, can be used to work out the size of the animal that left them. In his lab, Scott compares the scan of the Glenrock print against known measurements to calculate the creature's hip height.
So this is our single best preserved Tyrannosaur footprint. And what we're going to do right now is take a quick distance measure.
The measurements reveal a surprise. They're unusually small for a T-Rex.
Our Tyrannosaur tracks are about 505 millimeters in length. And that indicates an animal that's got a hip height, a total leg length of about 2.3 meters. Now, by Tyrannosaur standards, that's not very big.
The footprint of a grown T-Rex is about 1 meter long and half a meter wide. That's much larger than the footprint in Wyoming. Shrinking the foot to fit the print and extrapolating to the rest of the skeleton reveals that the dinosaur which left these tracks was only about 2 meters. But the footprint's shape is right for a tyrannosaur. So for Scott, there is only one conclusion. This is not an adult. It's a youngster.
We definitely are dealing with a juvenile tyrannosaur, probably a tyrannosaur tween, so an individual that's between 10, 11, 12 years of age.
The possibility that this footprint could belong to a young T-Rex is both rare and exciting. Fossil hunters have found dozens of adult T-Rex skeletons, most of them in North America. The T-Rex is probably the best understood dinosaur in the world. But when it comes to juvenile T-Rex, investigators have only found a handful of fossils. So we know very little about how young T-Rex developed and how they lived.
Finding the bones of babies and younger T-Rexes, this is a big deal. We always want to find new skeletons of younger T-Rexes. That will reveal so much new information about how the king of dinosaurs grew into its kingdom.
From what can be determined from the few fossils available, young T-Rex was slimmer than its elders. Its legs comparatively longer, its head comparatively smaller. But there is much still to discover about its behavior and abilities. Could they reveal what this teenage terror was up to? Not far from the Tyrannosaur trackway, Scott's team uncovers some clues. The footprints in the Badlands are a rare opportunity to learn about tyrannosaurs in their early years.
We've cut back into the hillside a little bit further with the hopes of finding more of our trail of tracks, and that's exactly what we've done.
More footprints. Scott thinks these tracks were made by a different kind of dinosaur, a plant-eating hadrosaur.
Hadrosaurs have got 3 wide-spreading toes. There's one toe, there's another, and then over here, covered up by mud, is the third. This is from a particularly large individual, easily pushing 30 feet in total length.
Hadrosaurs were large beasts that could grow up to 13 meters long and weighed over 7 tons. They probably lived in herds for safety, much like bison today. That's because, although they had tough, scaly skin, they had no armor. Was the young Tyrannosaur at Glenrock hunting them? It was once thought that T-Rex was just a scavenger. While it's unlikely that T-Rex would turn down a fresh carcass, evidence now shows that T-Rex was also a skilled hunter, capable of chasing down a hadrosaur.
Tyrannosaurus was absolutely a hunter. Tyrannosaurs have got very long legs, indicates that they're fast. We know from the bones of herbivorous dinosaurs that actually have tyrannosaur teeth lodged in them and have since healed afterwards that Tyrannosaurus was absolutely going after live prey.
But could the juvenile Tyrannosaur have also hunted down these giant hadrosaurs? The uncovered trackways allow the team to compare the speed of the 2 different creatures.
We have got the footprints of both hadrosaurs, duckbill dinosaurs, and tyrannosaurs. So both predator and prey walking across the same area, very likely within 24 hours of each other.
By carefully recording distances between the individual footprints, Scott can reconstruct the hadrosaur's gait.
So a wonderful thing about a trackway, as opposed to just a single isolated footprint, is you can measure the stride length of a dinosaur. You can figure out how far it was swinging its leg in between each footstep. This is actually recording prehistoric life in action.
Scott estimates they were traveling at nearly 5 kilometers an hour. So how does a tyrannosaur compare?
So here is a set of tracks, and we care about the left one. So we'll measure from the heel pad of each one and come up with that distance. And you can see it's going about 3.5 meters. So that's how much the Tyrannosaur is covering with each full swing of a leg.
The 11.5-foot leg swing suggests that the juvenile Tyrannosaur was traveling at around 6 miles an hour. It reveals that whether walking or running, T-Rex was far faster than its prey.
It's moving through its environment at roughly twice the rate of the duck-billed dinosaur. It makes sense if that's the animal you're going to hunt, you're fast enough to catch it.
Tyrannosaur was a sprinter, but Hadrosaur was a marathon runner who could often get a good head start.
If you're a hadrosaur, you just have to spot a predator that's literally the size of a billboard sign.
But in these confrontations, perhaps the juvenile T-Rex had help. It was long thought the T-Rex was a solitary hunter. But sites have now been discovered that contain many T-Rex remains, a mix of juveniles and adults. It raises the possibility that T-Rexes operated as a team.
It's pretty clear from these sites that tyrannosaurs normally would have been social animals. They would have grouped together. So if one T-Rex chasing you down isn't terrifying enough, imagine an entire group of them running after you.
A juvenile T-Rex would have needed guile and luck to catch a nimble hadrosaur. But even if it was successful, did this teenager have the power to bring such mighty prey down? Did the juvenile rely on the adult to finish the hunt? A clue could lie here on another Glenrock hillside, where the team is sifting through a layer rich in bones. Here, Scott is searching for fossilized remains from the mighty predator and hoping to find evidence of juveniles. It's a difficult and painstaking task.
We've got an abundance of Tyrannosaur material, but those are almost all adult specimens. The younger ones just don't seem to preserve as well.
The soft bones of the younger animals rarely endure. But in the fossil beds, the diggers often find the remains of tougher teeth.
I understand you've got something for me? Got a couple things, all right, all right. What do you got? Oh, look at that! That's gorgeous. That's the biggest one that we've found so far. So that, yes, absolutely.
The tooth is small and viciously sharp. But it's from a small velociraptor, not a tyrannosaur.
The raptor tooth is very flat. It's laterally compressed that way. The teeth of a raptor are better at piercing and slashing. Tyrannosaur tooth is much more rounded.
Today there's no sign of tyrannosaur teeth here, but on a previous dig, Scott made an incredible find: the tiny tooth of a hatchling.
When this Tyrannosaur hatched out of its egg, the size it was about on the scale of a house cat. It would grow the size of a monster like this. My gosh, is it scary. All of evolution and all of red in tooth and claw that nature is, this is the scariest tooth that's ever evolved.
T-Rex has the largest teeth of any dinosaur ever found. 30 centimeters long, with sharp points and serrated edges, they were formidable weapons. A male adult would have had over 50 of them in its jaws, making it the unstoppable killing machine of the Badlands. But how does the much smaller juvenile T-Rex compare? Did its bite have the power to kill the mighty hadrosaur? For paleontologist Steve Brussati, an adult T-Rex's teeth are hard to ignore.
It's really those teeth that are the most stunning thing about T-Rex. Some of these teeth were a foot long. And those teeth, they're sharp and they're strong. They're like a banana crossed with a steak knife. And they were so strong, T-Rex could crush through the bones of its prey. And that is a really gruesome, vile way of eating. Very few animals are able to do that, and T-Rex did that.
T-Rex's teeth are hugely impressive. But paleontologists suspect that the real secret to the adult T-Rex's bone-crushing bite lies elsewhere. Because bite strength is all about muscle. Scott examines a cast of a huge adult T-Rex skull. It comes from a dinosaur he helped uncover called Scotty.
So Scotty was found in Saskatchewan, Canada. Scotty is among the largest tyrannosaurs known in the world. We estimate that Scotty is over 40 feet in total length, with an estimated weight in excess of 8 tons. Tyrannosaurs are sort of the Rottweilers of the carnivorous dinosaurs. If you look at the depth of the lower jaw, it's absolutely enormous. This whole region right here is where tremendous jaw muscles would attach.
The jaw muscles in an adult T-Rex run up and attach to the bones at the back of the skull.
Back of the skull is expanded. That creates an extra large region for the huge jaw muscles to attach all across the top of the skull in this section right here and along the side. This is the place where the danger of a tyrannosaur lies. That's what powers the bite. And then they crush the jaws together like that.
But what about the juvenile T-Rex? Their jaws are thin and narrow, more delicate than the adult, with much smaller teeth and far less muscle. So, could a juvenile bite be strong enough to crush the bones of large prey? A clue lies in fossilized remnants of a hadrosaur.
This is a cast of bone from a very, very lucky dinosaur. Right there, and that object is one tyrannosaur tooth. A tyrannosaur caught all the way up to its tail, took a bite, the tooth embedded in the solid bone, but then the tooth snapped off and the hadrosaur just managed to get away.
For most people, this kind of fossil is a curiosity. But for paleontologists like Jack Tseng, it's an opportunity. Jack is fascinated by the bite force of extinct predators, especially young ones.
Bite force is important because it determines at which level in the food web a particular predator can exist. Whether or not juveniles were able to even hunt or attempt to hunt those animals partially depends on how much bite force they have.
Calculating the bite force of any animal is a challenge, let alone an extinct beast. So Jack uses a forensic mechanical press. It's able to recreate the bite marks left by a juvenile tyrannosaur on this rare hadrosaur tailbone.
We're actually able to reverse engineer the amount of force and amount of depth it would take for a juvenile tyrannosaur to sink its tooth into a hadrosaur.
Jack's experiment uses a replica juvenile tooth and a selection of cow bones. The press then drives the T-Rex tooth into the cow bone, with differing levels of force, until it recreates almost identical puncture marks to those found on the hadrosaur tailbone.
On these two specimens, we can see all the puncture marks we have experimentally created. And what we can see is that these large marks here, the oval-looking marks, are the best matches for the actual puncture marks. And they give us a sense of how much force it would have taken for a juvenile T-Rex to generate these marks on a hadrosaur tail. Our experiments actually suggest a higher bite force for juvenile T-Rex.
The juvenile bite force measures 5,641 newtons. To put that in perspective, although it's much less powerful than an adult T-Rex, this young Tyrannosaur's bite was still capable of crunching bone. At well over 5,000 newtons, it beats the king of the jungle, the lion.
It would have been most capable of puncturing thin bones, like those on the face or in certain parts of the tail.
Though an adult T-Rex could still run, the chase was probably a young animal's game, especially against a swift hadrosaur.
Juveniles, the teenagers, they had longer legs. They had more slender bodies. They could run faster. They were more agile. They could probably chase down prey over longer distances. The adults were bigger. They were bulkier. They couldn't move as fast. They probably couldn't really run more than about 10 miles an hour or so. Imagine carrying around 7 tons of muscle and flesh on your body, but only supporting it with 2 legs. That's what an adult would be.
So, how did this nimble juvenile end up as a hulking monster? Scientists are discovering that in its teenage years, T-Rex went through a sudden and dramatic metamorphosis. Throughout its life, T-Rex was an impressive eater. But bone analysis of juveniles reveals that T-Rex experienced a huge growth spurt as a teenager. In just 4 years, the juvenile that stalked the Badlands of Wyoming 66 million years ago grew from a 1-ton 14-year-old to a 5 1/4 ton 18-year-old, creating an adult body several times more massive, becoming a completely different creature.
The young T-Rexes, they would have been like Olympic sprinters. And over the course of their lives, they would have gone through a metamorphosis where they turned into heavyweight boxing champions. That's how T-Rex changed over the 30 years of its life.
So, what was T-Rex eating to grow so big, so quick? Popular imagination has it always feeding on other huge dinosaurs, like the hadrosaurs. But it's likely that juveniles mostly ate smaller creatures.
The younger ones with the longer legs that had more stamina, that could run faster, they could chase down prey over longer distances, but they were not huge animals, so they would have had to eat smaller prey, smaller dinosaurs, birds, mammals, lizards, those kind of things.
We know little about the number and nature of these small prehistoric creatures. That is because of the way fossils are created and detected.
Small bones, a lot more bad stuff can happen to them. They can break apart, they can crumble apart more easily. It's also, frankly, harder to spot them. There's a great deficit when it comes to small dinosaur species. As time goes on, I think we're going to discover that there were actually more small dinosaurs than there were big dinosaurs.
Often, the only small creatures preserved are those with uniquely tough remains, like prehistoric turtles.
All right, so this is our Cretaceous turtle shell. We've named the site Donatello after the most scientifically minded of the Ninja Turtles.
66 million years ago, these creatures would have lived alongside the giants of Wyoming.
Back in the late Cretaceous, tyrannosaurs and other dinosaurs were not the most common animals. They were, just like today, big animals vastly outnumbered by small ones, and turtles were among them. Did Tyrannosaurus have a taste for turtle soup? We do have evidence on some of the turtle shells that have been found here of Tyrannosaur bite marks on the shell. But the answer is probably yeah. Tyrannosaurus probably did snack on turtles.
Having such a varied diet allowed the juvenile to fuel its growth spurt. But as it expanded, it also changed proportion, its head swelling incredibly fast, whilst other body parts hardly changed at all.
We think of them as sort of the quintessential large-bodied carnivorous dinosaur. That's not true. They're actually a really, really weird group of carnivorous dinosaurs.
A T-Rex's forearms were one part of the dinosaur that didn't grow bigger as it matured into adulthood, making them look puny by comparison with the rest of the body.
The arms were so small and pathetic and tiny, these arms that were no bigger than my arms on an animal the size of a bus.
T-Rex's tiny arms are an enduring mystery. Paleontologists think that the reason why they stayed so small could be linked to the animal's supersized head and jaws.
That head really did all the work. T-Rex was like a giant land shark. So the T-Rex would have grabbed its prey with its jaws. It would have chopped up its prey. It would have swallowed its prey. The head was doing everything.
T-Rex's enormous head could have thrown its body off balance.
And that's probably a trade-off. Tyrannosaur is redepositing the weight on the front of the animal that was in the form of the arms into the head. So you sacrifice the arms to gain biting power. Next time you hear someone making fun of T-Rex for having those tiny little arms, and they really are small, T-Rex would have struggled to clap. It certainly couldn't wipe its mouth after a messy meal. You can remind that person those little arms are there so that T-Rex can have an incredibly nasty, bone-breaking bite.
Although its great weight now hindered its hunting ability, the adult T-Rex's overwhelming bite power allowed it to tackle other creatures the juvenile would never mess with. Among them was a plant eater called a nodosaur. A nodosaur was a cross between a prehistoric hedgehog and a tank. For a hungry T-Rex, this heavily armored beast that could weigh over a ton presented a completely different challenge.
Nodosaurs were big, armored, plant-eating dinosaurs, like this one here. They've got big osteoderms, that means bone that's growing within the skin, covering the back and forming sort of suit of armor. And you have not just thick, heavy plate armor, but bladed armor. You've got a suit of armor that a Tyrannosaur could not stand on, could not bite into without cutting its own mouth open.
Any animal that took on a nodosaur needed to use brains as well as brawn.
One of the stereotypes of dinosaurs that still does persist is that these were these dumb brutes, that they had small brains and weren't very smart. But we know that's not really the case.
Scientists have used medical CAT scanning technology to probe the inside of T-Rex skulls. The data has been used to build accurate models of the shape and size of their brains, revealing that they were much larger than previously thought.
T-Rex was a lot smarter than most other reptiles because it had a much bigger brain in proportion to its body size. T-Rex was not just some brutish monster. It was a highly intelligent animal.
One way a clever T-Rex could turn a nodosaur into a meal would be by flipping it over and attacking its soft underbelly.
That is the kink in a nodosaur's armor.
Scott examines some nodosaur bones he's found that look like they've fallen victim to this very trick.
This is a bone from the pelvis. This is a hip bone. You'll see on this side, there's a great big hole running through it, and that hole is not supposed to be there. Instead, it looks like it matches up really, really nicely with one tooth from a Tyrannosaur. It's possible that that does record the killing blow. This was a nodosaur that got munched on by a Tyrannosaur.
Providing they could be caught, both hadrosaurs and nodosaurs were vulnerable to a T-Rex assault. Was there any creature in the Badlands that could truly give tyrannosaurs a run for their money? In Wyoming, the dig team unearthed something that could help provide the answer. An enormous bone.
Oh, I'm super excited about it. This is the end that we found initially, and we just dug into the hillside and the bone kept going and going and going.
They think it's a leg bone from another dinosaur, Triceratops.
Triceratops is a huge herbivorous horned dinosaur, the largest of the horned dinos.
Their suspicions are confirmed when they find another fossil nearby.
That does look suspiciously frilly, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So this is looking like it's a section of Triceratops frill, the great neck shield at the back of the skull.
The frill of a Triceratops is a thick bone shield 1 meter wide. But it's just the tip of the iceberg in this animal's defenses. Triceratops had deadly horns up to almost a meter long, and a massive bone-plated skull with a razor-sharp, bone-cracking beak. Its low-slung, heavy body could grow over 9 meters long and was covered in thick, armor-plated skin. This meaty monster would be quite a catch, but in this vegetarian bruiser, T-Rex met its match.
Triceratops is a super badass dinosaur. Don't think of Triceratops socially as behaving like an elephant or a wildebeest. Think it more like a rhinoceros. Triceratops was more of a loner.
A loner with attitude. Healed bite marks in Triceratop bones have proved these animals survived T-Rex attacks. They could give as good as they got.
The classic clash between Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus is absolutely something that happened. If you're Tyrannosaur, you're scared of Triceratops. Triceratops is many tons of potentially angry and very, very sharp herbivore.
An angry and aggressive Triceratops was a challenge fit for only the largest and most experienced fighters.
Triceratops would not have been an easy meal, even for an adult, fully grown T-Rex. And for a younger T-Rex, one of those juveniles or teenagers, no way. A T-Rex juvenile, this would have been a non-starter situation.
It's unclear whether this Triceratops met its end in a fight to the death with a T-Rex. Further analysis may one day tell its story. For now, the big challenge is to remove it in one piece.
Okay, well, I'm happy with that. Even though the bone is fossilized, even though it's very, very hard, it's also incredibly brittle. If we just tried to yank it out right now, it would crumble apart in our hands. So what we need to do is to construct a plaster jacket around it.
Scott and his team prepare the bone with specialist glue before wrapping it in strips of fabric soaked in plaster of Paris. They then leave the bone to dry.
Really, it's the same technique a doctor would use wrapping a broken arm up in a cast while it heals.
Only once they are sure the bone is secure do they risk removing it.
Often the most dangerous part for the bone in any excavation is the flipping of the jacket. If we don't make our jacket well, the bone may crumble, it may give way, it may collapse under its own weight. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All the way, all the way. Yes! That is excellent.
Beautiful.
All right. Oh, yeah.
Mission accomplished. The team take the Triceratops bone back to base. When this huge fossil is analyzed, it will provide another window on the astonishing kingdom of the T-Rex. But what happened to this lost world? The finds here reveal that 66 million years ago, the Wyoming of the late Cretaceous period supported a lush and fertile ecosystem. The team is constantly finding remnants of the huge variety of life that filled its forests and waterways.
So this is one scale from a garfish. Garfish are armor-plated. Their scales are covered in enamel, same material that makes up our teeth. That makes them super hard and also gives the scales very, very high preservation potential.
The scale is evidence that at the time of T-Rex, this area was full of swamps and mangroves, perhaps a little like the Florida Everglades today. 66 million years ago, T-Rex had probably never had it so good.
This would have been a subtropical paradise. Out there in the plains would have been herds of herbivorous dinosaurs, and then in the shadows of the forest, presumably stalking their prey or just relaxing, would have been the Tyrannosaurus.
For millions of years, T-Rex was the alpha predator, affecting the lives and evolution of the creatures that lived in its shadow.
It ruled its ecosystems in North America at the end of the Cretaceous period. It was an ecosystem engineer.
You don't get the horns of Triceratops, the armor of Ankylosaurus, without the presence of Tyrannosaurus. They're all doing swell. We've got a thriving, complex dinosaur ecosystem.
So if this world was thriving, what went wrong? All the signs point to a sudden cataclysmic event.
Across Western North America, in places like Montana and the Dakotas, you find bones of T-Rex, and they're fairly common in rocks that are about 66 to 67 million years old. And then those bones disappear. And there's this thin little layer of clay. It's just about a centimeter thick, and it's dated to precisely 66 million years ago. And that layer of clay seems to be a bookmark.
The clay contains a high concentration of the element iridium. Iridium is rare on Earth, but not in space.
That iridium was the chemical fingerprint, the calling card of an asteroid that came down and ended the reign of the dinosaurs and caused an enormous extinction.
The asteroid was almost 10 kilometers across, a piece of space rock taller than Mount Everest. The explosive impact triggered shockwaves, firestorms, and tsunamis, and a planet-wide cloak of dust that blotted out the sun. It caused destruction on a global scale that few creatures could endure.
for the dinosaurs. They had been ruling the world for over 150 million years. They had been through it all. They'd been through global warming, they'd been through times of cool temperatures, they've been through rising and falling sea levels, through volcanoes, through all sorts of things. But they couldn't survive that instantaneous carnage of the asteroid.
In the chaos of the impact and its aftermath, 3/4 of all species on the planet were wiped out, including the mightiest of them all, the T-Rex.
The end of the age of dinosaurs is an ecological collapse. Photosynthesis starts to fail from the lack of sunlight. That kills off a lot of the large herbivores, and ultimately that kills off the large carnivore, including Tyrannosaurus.
Earth would never again be a planet ruled by dinosaurs. But despite the devastation, other species survived and would eventually thrive.
Among the survivors were some tiny, anonymous, humble little shadow dwellers that only came out at night, that made little burrows into the ground to hide from the dinosaurs. And those were mammals. Those were our ancestors. We had ancestors that stared down that asteroid and bested the dinosaurs.
The end of the road for the T-Rex was the beginning of our world.
And in dying in the asteroid impact, T-Rex opened up space for our mammal ancestors to survive and to proliferate and to prosper and to eventually lead to us. And I think if that asteroid didn't hit and there were still T-Rexes and other dinosaurs around, there wouldn't be space for us. So, this whole story, the dinosaurs, T-Rex, us, this is all interconnected.
A connection to the world of T-Rex does still survive in the creatures that fill the skies.
Today's birds are dinosaurs. They evolved from dinosaurs. They are part of the dinosaur family tree. They are part of the dinosaur family album. There's about 14,000 species of birds. There's only about 6,000 species of mammals today. So in that one sense, the dinosaurs continue their dominion over the mammals even in the present world.
Scott's T-Rex dig is over for another season.
I'm really happy with what we got.
But their hunt for the world of the T-Rex continues. This remarkable landscape still hides many secrets, and for even the most studied dinosaurs, many mysteries remain.
We have so little. We're like detectives at a crime scene where there's only one little bit of hair, one little fingerprint. So we need to find more.
The full story of T-Rex is yet to be revealed. But thanks to recent discoveries, we now know more than ever about this magnificent lost beast. We know that in its youth, T-Rex was a fast and agile hunter, an eating machine that devoured whatever it could to fuel an explosive growth spurt in its teens. As an adult, T-Rex sacrificed its forearms for an unrivaled bone-crunching bite, matching brawn with brains, so it could overwhelm even the most armored opponents. The Tyrannosaur, the creator of these footprints in the mud of prehistoric Wyoming, was no match for the asteroid that destroyed its world. T-Rex was the Earth's ultimate apex predator and the last great king of the dinosaurs. In South Dakota, USA, investigators dig deep into a 200,000-year-old pit filled with the bones of an Ice Age titan, the mammoth.
Mammoths are one of the most famous megafauna that ever existed. And their familiar furry form is what comes to mind as iconic when you think of the Ice Age.
A towering colossus, the mammoth roamed the globe for more than 1 million years.
We knew them. Our species, Homo sapiens, encountered mammoths, saw mammoths. They are a part of our evolutionary story as well.
What happened to these once mighty beasts? And why do they no longer walk among us? Now, new discoveries from a unique site could solve the mystery of why the mammoths disappeared.
There's so much here. I feel like after 45 years, I'm just now beginning to know what to study.
Did the planet become too hot for these Ice Age titans? Or did our ancestors drive them to extinction? To solve the secrets of the mighty mammoth's reign, we will see this lost beast like never before, flying inside skin and bone. We'll resurrect its vanished world and reveal the final days of this iconic giant. The Black Hills of South Dakota are one of America's greatest natural wonders. An immense mountain range of rugged beauty, home to acres of forest, and even a national monument, Mount Rushmore. The little town of Hot Springs lies at the foot of this vast wilderness. This frontier settlement is known as the Southern Gateway to the Black Hills, but it also harbors an extraordinary secret. A prehistoric sinkhole filled with thousands of fossils, among them the bones of one of the largest mammals that ever walked the earth, the mammoth.
Mammoths to me are, in many ways, more than exciting. They're iconic, they're big, they're massive. One has to like mammoths.
In charge of the excavation is Dr. Jim Mead, a specialist in mammoth paleontology. Jim was part of a team that came here to Hot Springs when a construction worker's digger pulled an enormous tusk out of the ground.
We've been excavating in this bone bed for 4.5 decades, a long time. I'm paid to do my passion. I love this. And it's neat to be able to look down there and realize when we excavated that mammoth, it hadn't seen light in 140,000 years. It's truly amazing.
Jim and his team have found the remains of more than 60 mammoths here. There are now so many, they have had to build a special protective building around the bones to safeguard and investigate them. Mammoths are an extinct kind of prehistoric elephant. The woolly mammoth, with its large shaggy coat and huge curved tusks, is one of the most iconic lost beasts of all time. But like the elephants of Africa and India today, mammoths didn't all belong to the same species. From a careful examination of the bones at Hot Springs, Jim can tell that most of the mammoths here are true giants.
Here we are clear at the rear end of the mammoth. This is the femur. That's this bone right here. What this allows us to do is make these measurements compared to other measurements and say, oh, this animal is 12 feet tall.
Piecing together the bones at Hot Springs reveals a colossal type of mammoth, carrying a long sloping spine and a huge head. From its jaws, enormous curved tusks stretch to nearly 5 meters long. Thick skin once covered the flesh and bones. But unlike the iconic woolly mammoth, this animal was comparatively hairless. This was a Columbian mammoth, a species unique to the Americas. Why are so many of these magnificent animals buried here? And why do they no longer roam the earth today? The Columbian mammoth is one of the last mammoth species. Paleontologists think it evolved from an elephant that crossed into North America from Asia millions of years ago when sea levels were lower. This disappearance of these prehistoric beasts is one of the great unsolved mysteries of paleontology.
We know that mammoths, whether they were in Europe, Asia, or here, are really just a form of elephant, if you will. How come then mammoths are extinct? Not just, say, here in the Black Hills, but all over North America at pretty much the same time. That's one of the many questions we have.
Skeletons, like the ones at Hot Springs, could help solve this mystery The sheer number of mammoths here is exceptional. It's one of the largest concentrations of these animals in the world. The Hot Springs mammoths lived during what scientists call the Ice Age. 200,000 years ago, when the first of these animals died, huge ice sheets blanketed large parts of North America. In some parts, the glaciers were more than 3 kilometers thick, but in the south, the climate was very different. The Black Hills of South Dakota were cold, but ice-free, making them the perfect stomping ground for the Columbian mammoths. These titans were the heavyweight champions of the Americas. Weighing in at 9 tons and standing over 4 meters tall, these giants traversed grasslands in search of food. The Columbian mammoths thrived in these milder conditions. It was a highly successful species, found as far south as Mexico. So, why did so many die in this one place? A clue could lie in the site's unusual geology. The Hot Springs sinkhole that contains these mammoths formed hundreds of thousands of years ago, when the ground surface fell into an underground cavern. Sinkholes are deadly and can open up suddenly without warning, trapping anyone or anything above them. But researchers discover that when these mammoths died, Hot Springs was the site of a sprawling warm water lake. It means that many of the fossils here, they submerged in water, making them unusually delicate.
The warm water here has leached out all the collagen, all the material that gives our body strength. That's leached out, leaving behind basically a shell. So these are actually very delicate. At this point, it looks very sturdy and so forth, but it is not.
Jim works with paleontologist Kelly Lubbers, who removes some of the more fragile bones for preservation. Few of the bones show signs of serious injury or trauma. It seems that many of these mammoths drowned. This is a mass grave, but close analysis of the bones reveals that these mammoths didn't all die at the same time during the original sinkhole collapse.
We can see that our sediments are being deposited over an extended period of time, and that also correlates with what we see within our bones. So that all can tell us that this was not one massive event that killed off the mammoths. We're seeing that these mammoths came in and slowly accumulated over time.
Hot Springs was a watery grave, a death pit that claimed the lives of dozens of Ice Age titans again and again.
From where I'm standing is about 200,000 years ago to behind me at the top of the excavation is about 100,000 years ago. So you're looking at 100,000 years of deposition of mammoths and sediments and water. It is unique. This is a community of animals that came in here. There's a big story here, the interaction of climate, environment, and these mammoths. It's phenomenal.
The Hot Springs bone bed is an extraordinary time capsule. A 100,000-year chapter in the story of the mammoths. One that could help explain more about their lives at the height of the Ice Age and perhaps why these animals disappeared. But there's a mystery. Why did so many mammoths drown in this seemingly ordinary lake? What drew them here in the first place? The Columbian mammoths were one of the largest mammoth species. They required enormous quantities of plant matter to survive. Preserved pollen from the site indicates that the surrounding habitat could have supported a variety of vegetation. And the warm waters of the lake would have provided a fertile ground. Were mammoths coming here to feed?
We know that looking at elephants today, these mammoths are probably gulping down 300, 400, 500 pounds of vegetation a day. And we know that they're taking in a lot of water. So is there enough here to sustain a herd?
To support such a large appetite, the Columbian mammoths would have to travel miles in search of suitable food. To understand if these ones were gathering at hot springs to feed, the researchers must find out what sort of vegetation they were capable of eating. In New York, Dr. Joy Reidenberg is a comparative anatomist at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. At her laboratory, she studies the tooth of a mammoth to investigate what these giants ate.
If we look at the mammoth tooth and a modern elephant tooth, we see a lot of similarities. They're both massive structures comprised of many plates put together. The enamel on these teeth is very thick, but if it were thin, it probably would have cracked because these teeth were under a lot of pressure as they were grinding them together.
Mammoths developed a clever adaptation to overcome extensive tooth wear. These beasts had teeth thicker than bricks, but also strong jaws. Their powerful chewing action would have ground down the teeth over time. But before the animal risked starvation, a new set of teeth grew in from the back of the jaw and pushed the worn ones out of the front, like a conveyor belt. In a lifetime of about 60 years, mammoths could go through 6 sets of new teeth, an evolutionary superpower that allowed them to make the most of the poor quality food in their environment. In the laboratory at Hot Springs, Jim and his team hunt for further clues to find out if the mammoths were coming here to feed.
The best way to understand what the animal's eating is to look at its dung.
These unusual specimens provide invaluable information, visible evidence of what the Columbian mammoths ate.
So it tells us about climate, local environment, biotic community, and what was on its dinner plate.
Jim has extracted DNA from the dung, which confirms that it came from a Columbian mammoth. With the species established, next he looks at the contents.
You can see the texture to it, the fragments. You can see that it's grasses. It's not twigs, it's not leaves, it's not seeds. It's showing that it's a grazer, by all means. So with this sample and other ones, we know that besides cool season grasses that dominate the diet and warm season grasses, we also get rushes, which are an aquatic plant. They require good running water. We're also going to get sagebrush, typical good old sagebrush, saltbush, another dry adapted shrub.
The plants identified in the dung would have been very similar to those growing at Hot Springs.
It's probably unusual in this part of North America to have that much green vegetation around a pond with warm water. And so it's an attraction. It's a restaurant out in the middle of nowhere, if you will, for these mammoths.
It's highly likely that mammoths were visiting Hot Springs to eat and drink, and perhaps even to bathe. Researchers believe that Columbian mammoths were probably good swimmers, like elephants today. Their huge body mass would have given them natural buoyancy. Why then did so many drown in the water? At the deep end of the bone bed, Kelly Lubbers investigates an almost complete skeleton of a huge, sprawled mammoth.
Over here, we have Murray, who is one of our more articulated specimens. So articulation essentially just means that the bones are preserved as they would be in place. So here you can see his whole spine extending down. You can see his ribs sticking out. You can see his pelvis over here, that butterfly-shaped bone. Murray's level of preservation is certainly one part that makes him unique.
The seemingly shallow lake concealed a hidden danger, the deep sinkhole with steep sides. Mammoths that went too far in to eat or bathe could easily lose their footing. Although mammoths were good swimmers, they were unable to find a foothold. and couldn't climb back out. They were doomed to perish in the sinkhole, their bones preserved in the sediment.
So Murray here, since we don't have any sort of indication that he would have been sick or had any sort of injury, would have come in and likely trying to get out of the sinkhole died of exhaustion or drowning.
This Columbian mammoth is one of 61 individuals discovered so far that wandered into the deep water of Hot Springs. Most of the victims were young males, trapped by the slippery mud on the banks of the lake. But despite the deaths of these animals, their bones reveal that Columbian mammoths were thriving as recently as 100,000 years ago. So if mammoths did successfully inhabit places like this for more than 1 million years, why did they suddenly disappear? More than 7,000 kilometers from Hot Springs, in France, just east of Paris, is the village of Changy-sur-Marne. It's home to an extraordinary set of mammoth fossils, discovered during an excavation at a quarry in 2012. Archaeologist Gregory Bell leads the team here.
Donc, dans cette place, nous avons donc à peu près 200 os de mammouth qui sont regroupés du site de Changy-sur-Marne. Les gros os longs, en fait, on va dire tibia, pelvis, scapula, fémur. Et puis de l'autre côté, donc, on a des côtes.
The bones stored here are not like those in Hot Springs. They come from a different mammoth species.
Voilà. Donc là, ça c'est une des dents de la mandibule.
Gregory is able to identify the species thanks to these extraordinarily large teeth. Measuring the distance between the enamel ridges on the surface of the molar reveals that these are the remains of a woolly mammoth.
Et ça nous permet comme ça de distinguer que les ossements, enfin en tout cas cette mandibule, et les autres ossements en fonction de leur taille, dernière espèce de la lignée des mammouths qui est le mammouth laineux, Mammuthus primigenus.
This woolly mammoth from France is very different to those found at Hot Springs. While Columbian mammoths stand nearly 4 meters tall, the woolly ones in Changy-sur-Marne are nearly 1 meter shorter. And they had a thick coat of fur to keep their bodies warm. So what was Ice Age life like for these mammoths compared to their cousins on the other side of the world? Complete woolly mammoth skeletons in France are rare. Only 3 others have ever been found. It makes the discovery at Changy-sur-Marne an important opportunity to learn more about this elusive creature. The first challenge with a find like this is to sort out all the bones. Over time, the river has moved the remains from their original position, making it difficult to understand how they fit together. Careful analysis reveals a surprise. These bones belong to not just one mammoth, but 2.
On avait par exemple 3 défenses de mammouth, donc ça pouvait correspondre à 2 individus au moins. Et puis on a découvert d'autres ossements qui nous confirmaient bien qu'il y avait un deuxième individu parmi ces ossements.
The next step is to build up a more detailed picture about the 2 mammoths, including their sex and age.
Un adulte assez vieux, probablement une femelle, puisqu'on a une morphologie du pelvis qui pourrait correspondre à celle d'une femelle. Et puis un jeune adulte mâle représenté par quelques ossements.
Gregory uses the long bones, like the femur, to estimate the height of the woolies.
La femelle, en tout cas l'individu le plus âgé, qui pourrait être une femelle, a une taille assez standard. On est en dessous de 3 mètres de hauteur au garrot, 2,9 mètres à peu près, alors que celui du mâle, du jeune adulte, atteindrait à peu près 3,10 mètres à peu près de hauteur au garrot.
Woolly mammoths evolved from the same common ancestor as their Columbian cousins in America. But they preferred to live in much colder environments. these woolies lived at roughly the same time as the Columbian mammoths in Hot Springs. But while their American cousins feasted on the tough grasses of South Dakota, in France, blocks of ice would have floated along the rivers that wound through the open plains. The Ice Age was not the single big freeze of popular imagination. Temperatures across the world fluctuated with warmer periods and times of extreme cold. The unstable climate had a direct impact on mammoth numbers and where the different species could be found. Woolly mammoths first emerged in East Asia during a cold period 800,000 years ago. They spread across the steppe that ran all the way through Europe. But around 130,000 years ago, temperatures suddenly rose, wreaking havoc with mammoth populations. In Western Europe, the woolly mammoth almost completely disappeared. The newly dated bones of Changy-sur-Marne show that it only reappeared on the continent when temperatures started to drop again.
Ça fait partie des premiers mammouths qui reviennent en Europe occidentale, qui recolonisent en tout cas le...
It's an important discovery that could help scientists better understand the movements of the mammoths during the Ice Age and how sensitive they were to change. So what was happening to their American cousins on the other side of the world at the same time? Across the Atlantic, the team in South Dakota have been studying the sediment layers in the pit. They've found evidence for some of these climatic fluctuations. The rising temperatures that drove the woolly mammoths from Western Europe dried up the lake at Hot Springs, turning it into a muddy quagmire.
This is a footprint, and this is a footprint. Think of wandering through a muddy pond, and yet you're in water, but you're making a footprint. You're stepping in it, and you're pulling it out of the mud, and it's making this contortions.
Sediment eventually filled the deadly sinkhole, making it safe for mammoths and other animals to cross unharmed. The Hot Springs mammoth bones are found below this layer in earlier depths.
What we're getting are footprints of a variety of animals. So they're coming in, doing what they want to, and they can get out. If they couldn't get out, we'd have their fossils.
Evidence from both sides of the Atlantic reveals that the constantly changing climate of the Ice Age could affect both species of mammoths in different ways. The Columbians thrived in warmer periods, while the woolies adapted better to cooler conditions. But despite these challenges, both mammoth species were remarkably resilient. They rebounded when temperatures changed back. So what other pressures did they face in their environment? Mammoths weren't the only species that regularly visited the Hot Springs Lake. In the bone bed, paleontologists find the remains of many other animals that died in the thick mud at the bottom of the sinkhole.
The range of the species we excavated go from very small, tiny critters like slugs, snails, clams, voles, prairie dogs, to middle-sized mammals, like include very exotic pronghorn antelopes, shrub ox, llama, and extinct camel.
The team is building a complete picture of life at this watering hole. And it seems that water wasn't the only danger faced by the mammoths here. The pit has preserved a host of teeth that belong to animals higher up the food chain, all of them designed to tear into flesh and kill. To defend themselves, mammoths had the mother of all teeth, From birth, their incisors kept growing, reaching up to nearly 5 meters and weighing in at 45 kilos. These were the mammoth's tusks. So how did these fearsome Ice Age beasts fare alongside each other? Jim's team has uncovered 121 tusks in the sinkhole pit.
This is one of our larger tusks. The nice thing about it, you can see the whole length. You get an idea how massive it is at the top. And some tusks, you can tell if the animal is, quote, left-handed or right-handed on how much these tusks are worn.
These sharp, solid ivory tusks were not only used for fending off predators. Mammoths could clear snow with them to get to the undergrowth during long, cold winters.
We should look at tusks to be like a multi-tool. It's multiple uses. There's a site, about an hour from here, where 2 mammoths are battling with their tusks. They're getting entwined and they get stuck. So a tusk like this could easily be used by a female getting rid of predators.
But the team at Hot Springs has also found evidence of another astonishing giant that could give a mammoth a run for its money.
We are looking at the short-faced bear skull, which was found here at the mammoth site, together with other remains, including partial skeleton of it. Short-faced bear was the largest predator in North America since the last million years.
The short-faced bear was larger than the modern grizzly or polar bear, and a formidable Ice Age predator.
It has 2 rows of the teeth, complete, and we have 1 canine. The jaws were strong. You can see that the mandibles are quite high. Typically for carnivorans, you don't see that feature. You see that feature in the omnivorous mammals.
The strong jaw and sharp teeth allowed it to tear through meat. The bears may have become trapped in the sinkhole, scavenging on unlucky dead mammoths, but they weren't regularly hunting them. The short-faced bear was just one of many supersized creatures that thrived alongside the mammoths. There were saber-toothed tigers with fangs the size of daggers, giant lumbering ground sloths, and a rhinoceros with a woolly coat. But as recently as 4,000 years ago, all of these megabeasts had disappeared, not just the mammoths. Across the history of our planet, mass extinctions have happened for many different reasons. Natural catastrophes such as volcanic eruptions, meteors and disease have wiped out huge swathes of animal life, like the dinosaurs. But there's no hard evidence that anything like this happened at the end of the last Ice Age. The extinction that killed off the mammoths is unique in that it only affected large mammals. Why? Evolution expert Steve Brusatte from Edinburgh University is among researchers who believe a new species played a significant role in driving the mammoths and the megafauna to extinction.
There is enormous debate among scientists still today about why the mammoths died out. And for me, I think the evidence points in one direction. There is a killer that has been implicated, and that killer, very sadly, is us, humans.
Early humans were hunter-gatherers who migrated from the African continent probably in several waves, as early as 2 million years ago. One possibility is that the arrival of modern human hunters in places like North America may have pushed these animals over the edge as they struggled with fluctuating temperatures. Steve suspects that the mammoth's physiology may have made them particularly vulnerable to these highly intelligent predators.
This right here is the skull of a young elephant. It gives us some insight into a bit of a drawback that not just elephants today, but mammoths in the past had, a hindrance that affected them. And that is, they're such big animals.
Mammoth calves were very big and developed in the womb for long periods. Like elephants today, it probably took about 22 months for the baby to be born.
That's a long time for something to go wrong. And if there was a disaster, a fire, a flood, or maybe some human hunters coming through and decimating a population, mammoths couldn't recover very quickly.
It would have taken mammoths a long time to regain their numbers. But did early humans really hunt these giants? And if so, in what numbers? At the Changy-sur-Marne site, the team found evidence that humans were here too. Near the mammoth bones, they find several small fragments of flint and stone that had been shaped and worked into stone tools. Could these shards be the remains of spear or arrowheads? Evidence that humans here were hunting and killing mammoths. Gregory has a theory of how humans may have created the microscopic marks. It's not necessarily the result of hunting.
À ce niveau-là, parce que c'est une des premières côtes qu'on a sur la cage thoracique du mammouth, on pourrait envisager ou bien l'ouverture de ces côtes pour détacher de la viande, par exemple, ou également ce qu'on a envisagé aussi avec, en regardant la localisation de ces traces, probablement aussi du retrait des viscères à l'intérieur de l'animal.
The flint fragments and bones date to the age of Neanderthals in Europe, an early species of human who lived alongside our ancestors. Gregory isn't convinced that these are hunting tools.
On n'a pas de traces évidentes d'une chasse. Si ces marques correspondent bien à du prélèvement, les hommes ont pu, soit dans le premier cas, conduire les animaux vers un endroit instable pour eux, les piéger, et puis les tuer, c'est possible, ou bien intervenir une fois que les mammouths sont morts naturellement.
The scratch marks are strong evidence that Neanderthals butchered mammoths for their meat. But without the remains of traps or complete spearheads, it's difficult to prove if humans actually killed these two mammoths. Even though Neanderthals were fierce hunters of the Ice Age, hunting mammoths would have been no easy task. Due to their size, fearsome tusks, and the thickness of their flesh, mammoths would have been very difficult to kill.
Tuer un mammouth en contact direct devait être extrêmement difficile pour les hommes du Paléolithique, parce qu'il fallait avoir une très bonne anatomie du mammouth. Donc il fallait trouver le point sensible et bien visé.
Gregory thinks the impact of hunting by prehistoric humans could only have been a small factor in the overall extinction of the mammoth.
Les mammouths et les hommes ont cohabité en Europe occidentale depuis très très longtemps. Hein.
Ancient humans would have mostly hunted smaller animals that were easier to kill, like horse, deer, and bison.
Donc ils n'ont pas eu, à mon avis, un impact important sur la mortalité, sur les populations de mammouths.
Our ancestors walked among the mammoths for more than 1 million years, and it's unlikely that they alone wiped them out. So what happened to the last of the mammoths? And how did their species finally come to an end? The mammoths at Hot Springs in South Dakota and Changy-sur-Marne in France both managed to adapt to periods of dramatic temperature change. When temperatures became too hot or too cold, they retreated to more suitable areas and returned when conditions improved. But around 15,000 years ago, there was another sudden rise in global temperatures that affected the mammoth's habitat around the world. And this time, neither the Columbian nor the woolly mammoths would ever recover. It's a mystery that continues to puzzle researchers. Adrian Lister is a paleobiologist at the world-famous Natural History Museum in London. Its stores contain an amazing array of fossils from the Ice Age. Adrian and his team have the remains of an almost complete adult male woolly mammoth and at least 4 younger individuals here. These animals died after falling into pits in the ground, left by retreating ice. Radiocarbon dating of the bones has revealed an important result. The mammoths are only 14,000 years old.
We only need a very small amount of bone or tooth to do that. If we're lucky, we can also get DNA from that. So from a tiny sample like that, we can learn an awful lot about the animal.
Analysis of the bones reveals that these animals were in good health when temperatures started to rise. Scientists think that at first, mammoths thrived on the lush grasses left behind as the glacial ice retreated. But global warming did more than just melt ice. The open grasslands that mammoths preferred steadily began to change. Over the next few thousand years, trees covered the mammoth steppe, creating a leafy canopy. At the same time, the mammoths disappeared. Why couldn't they survive in the woodlands? A clue lies with remains from frozen Siberia. They reveal how woolly mammoths were very specialized and adapted to thrive in the cold environment and tough grasslands of the mammoth steppe.
So this is a mammoth mandible or lower jawbone from Siberia, and you can see the 2 huge molar teeth in the jaw. Each one of these is just the lower teeth. And these very thin, finely spaced enamel bands like this are really adapted to grass eating. This is some real mammoth hair from one of the Siberian carcasses preserved in the ice. The hair could be up to 1 meter long, and it's really thick and dense. It also had a fine layer of wool close to the skin. This again was one of the specializations of the mammoth for the Ice Age environment.
These adaptations evolved over millions of years.
So these are 3 fossil teeth showing the evolution of the woolly mammoth. This one is about 2 million years old. This one's about 500,000 years old. And this is the classic woolly mammoth of about 50,000 years old.
The earliest tooth has very few enamel ridges and is shorter than the woolly mammoths, perfect for eating soft leaves from trees and shrubs. As they evolved, the teeth got taller and the ridges more numerous to tackle tough grasses grazed from the ground. By the time the Condover mammoths were roaming the UK, their teeth had become so highly specialized they couldn't have eaten anything but grass.
So we can see an evolutionary succession leading to the very specialized woolly mammoth in its teeth.
Rising temperatures increased the number of trees, replacing the grasses that mammoths relied on for food.
Trees require a certain warmth to grow. Even today, if you travel northwards through Siberia, you pass through the rich coniferous forest. Eventually, the trees start thinning out, and by the time you get past the Arctic Circle, it's the open tundra. Once the climate started to warm from about 15,000 years ago, their range progressively spread northwards until we got to the situation we're in today.
Adrian thinks that this loss of habitat was devastating for the mammoths. They were so adapted to eating and digesting grass, they couldn't survive on leaves alone as trees took over.
I think most of the work of reducing the mammoth populations was done by the climate change and the vegetation changes that followed, and it may be that alone is enough to account for extinction.
Human populations thrived in this warming environment, as the remaining Columbian and woolly mammoths struggled. Astonishing fossil discoveries in the far north shed light on the lives of the very last of these Ice Age animals.
There was one group of mammoths that found refuge on an island called Wrangel Island, way up in the Arctic.
Around 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose along the Arctic coast of Siberia, trapping a group of woolly mammoths on Wrangel Island. They survived until about 4,000 years ago, when the pharaohs were building the pyramids of Egypt.
These mammoths were not well. They were not healthy. Their populations were so small that they became inbred. The islands they lived on were so harsh. They were cold. There wasn't a lot of plants growing there.
For the last mammoths on Earth, life in the Arctic was a bleak existence.
The populations were so small, the genetic defects piled up, and sometime around 4,000 years ago, the very last mammoth breathed its final breath on Wrangel Island.
For more than 1 million years, these extraordinary giants thrived across multiple continents. They scaled land bridges revealed by lower sea levels and fine-tuned their adaptations to cold climates with specialized teeth and fur.
We knew them. Our species, Homo sapiens, encountered mammoths, saw mammoths, drew mammoths on cave walls, hunted mammoths. They are a part of our evolutionary story as well. There have been dozens of these cycles of glacial and interglacial periods, of times when the ice grows and the ice melts. But it was only this most recent one when the megafauna died. There is still fierce scientific debate about the death of the mammoths.
10,000 years ago, with the dawn of the end of the glacial period, their world transformed. As temperatures warmed and humans spread, these giants finally disappeared forever.
It's one of the best studied examples of extinction that we have, and yet we're still arguing about whether it was the climate change, the vegetation change, people, or I think probably a combination of all three.
Today, work continues at sites like Hot Springs. New discoveries here could yet transform what we know about this majestic beast, and the role that climate and our ancestors might have played in its disappearance.
There's something critical that is gone. Something created a nick point that they've disappeared. Maybe that story is here or nearby. We have a lot to work on.
Today, when we're so concerned about the endangered status and potential extinction of large animals like the elephants, which were so closely related to the mammoth, understanding why the mammoth went extinct can help us to hopefully preserve their living relatives.
Discovering the truth behind their disappearance would not only solve one of nature's great mysteries, the answer might help save other species from one day sharing the fate of this magnificent lost beast. In the heart of Los Angeles, buried beneath this bustling city, investigators hunt for a lost terror of the Ice Age. The saber-toothed tiger.
The saber-toothed tiger is one of the most iconic extinct animals. This is a machete-mouthed demon.
The saber-tooth was one of the most fearsome animals ever to walk the earth. A predator armed with canines nearly 18 centimeters long. But how much do we really know about it?
It is a strange animal. There's still a lot of unanswered questions.
Now, our cameras have rare access to investigators as they examine prehistoric clues, sealed in a bed of tar for thousands of years. How did the saber-tooth hunt? And did its oversized teeth drive it to extinction?
It's extremely sharp, even more pointed than most dinosaurs.
We'll travel to a time when giant mammals roamed the earth, stripping away flesh and bone. We reveal the incredible buried secrets of the kingdom of the saber-toothed tiger. Los Angeles, California. A metropolis of nearly 4 million people. Here in the shadow of the Hollywood Hills, a remarkable team of paleontologists gears up for work as the city stirs into life. The team is digging in Hancock Park, just off the famous Wilshire Boulevard, home to some of LA's finest buildings. This part of the city is also the location of one of the most extraordinary urban excavation sites in the world, the La Brea Tar Pits, a geological phenomenon that's brimming with millions of fossils from a bygone age. 50,000 years ago, Los Angeles was a scrub-like woodland that concealed a deadly secret. Pools of sticky asphalt that trapped any animal venturing too close. Thousands of creatures are buried here, but one stands out. Smilodon fatalis, the saber-toothed tiger. Stronger than a modern lion, with huge curved fangs, this lost beast is legendary, but its life remains a mystery. How did this supersized monster survive in an Ice Age world? And why is it no longer stalking LA today? Dr. Myrene Balisi is an expert on prehistoric carnivores. She's part of the team here at the La Brea Tar Pits. This famous LA landmark lies on top of the Salt Lake oil fields, a huge reservoir of liquid asphalt that flows under the city streets.
You can really smell the asphalt. It's like a rotten egg smell. Asphalt is basically the crudest version of crude oil. It's very sticky. You can still see the asphalt bubbling up in this pit.
The first people to dig at La Brea were Native Americans, who used the pits as a natural source of pitch. In the 1800s, settlers mistook the bones here for the remains of stray cattle. It wasn't until 1901 that they were identified as Ice Age fossils. Today, excavators still find fossils preserved in thick black liquid. Over the last century, they have pulled out more than 3 million specimens from the tar pits here. From familiar-looking animals such as deer and bison, to huge prehistoric predators such as the iconic saber-toothed tiger.
This is the classic saber-toothed Smilodon fatalis. This particular one is missing a good chunk of its canine, but you can tell that it is a saber-tooth. It is a strange animal.
Smilodon is not actually a tiger, just a distant cousin. It belongs to a now extinct branch of the cat family that may have crossed into North America more than 2.5 million years ago, when lower sea levels created a land bridge with Asia. Excavators have found more than 2,000 of these magnificent beasts here.
For such a famous animal, one would think, oh, it's probably oversaturated. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and that's why this animal is still actively being studied today.
The first step towards unraveling the life of the saber-tooth is to retrieve its fossils. It's no easy task. In some pits, the asphalt has dried up, but in others, it is still liquid. Digging here is a slow and messy process, but the reward is worth the effort.
Right now, we are walking to Project 23, which is one of the 2 active excavations ongoing at the La Brea Tar Pits.
This project is named after 23 huge wooden crates. They contain tons of solidified asphalt, dug out from a nearby construction site. Each box is crammed with thousands of bones from many different animals.
Our next door neighbor here, the LA County Museum of Art, they were excavating for a large underground parking structure when they ran into the skull of a mammoth. And that discovery then jump-started this entire project. Hey, Sean.
Specialist excavator Sean Campbell works to examine the bones in box number 2.
What are you finding today?
So today we're in a pretty tightly compacted, fine-grained sediment area, mostly silts, clays, with some fine sands.
Each crate contains a jumble of bones. Sean must carefully chip away at the rock-hard asphalt to free them and work out which species they come from. Many are not predators like the saber-tooth, but plant-eating herbivores.
It takes time to develop a trained eye to not only see the fossils, but definitely identify the fossils for what they are. Probably the one you're looking at is part of the pelvis. We're not exactly sure which species yet. It could be a horse, it could be a bison, it could potentially be a camel.
The animals discovered here lived at the end of the last ice age, between 50 to 10,000 years ago. In the north, huge ice sheets covered what is now Canada, but southern regions like California had a much milder climate. Here, winters could be harsh during the Ice Age peak. But temperatures in the LA basin were perhaps not that different to today, and hardy forests flourished.
You can actually see huge portions of trees jutting up out of the next level. This is a portion of a seed pod, most likely from a juniper. Roughly all of this material is going to be around 44,000 years old. To help make that 3D map.
Sean uses laser mapping to plot each of his finds into a special grid.
So this is box 2 so far.
The grid allows him to build up an incredible 3D picture of every single fossil inside the box.
Cool. So we're looking at it from the top down.
Yes, and so you can see how they're dipped and oriented and angled.
The more excavators like Sean record their findings, the stranger this site becomes. The number of carnivores, like saber-tooth, far outnumber their plant-eating prey.
I have found some spectacular things. I've been excavating for a little under 9 years. I've found entire saber-toothed cat skulls, many, many dire wolf skulls, tons of coyote skulls, foxes, weasels. We have over 1,000 individual saber-toothed cat skulls that are so well preserved that they would be considered near complete.
The discovery is puzzling. Plant-eating animals are more numerous in nature. But at La Brea, paleontologists find more meat-eaters. Why? Experts think that the tar pits were what's known as a carnivore trap. A single stuck herbivore would lure many predators in search of a seemingly easy meal. But this banquet was a last supper. The predators became stuck themselves and slowly perished. Just a few trapped animals every 10 years over 30,000 years could account for the huge number of saber-tooths found here. La Brea is an unparalleled time capsule, a unique opportunity to study the hunting behavior of this magnificent beast, and much more. Steve Brussati is a paleontologist from Edinburgh University.
This animal, when it was alive, just a few tens of thousands of years ago, it would have been similar in overall size to a Siberian tiger, but bulkier. What really sets them apart are these saber canines, and really these things speak for themselves. These are sharp, but they're also very thin, almost like a scalpel blade.
This monster cat had extremely long canines, even by saber-tooth standards. They could grow up to 18 centimeters long and had serrated edges like steak knives. This made them perfect for puncturing tough hide. But while they were strong at punching down, their extreme length made them weak at resisting sideways forces, such as those produced by struggling prey. Smilodon needed to make a fast and clean kill, or its teeth could snap. So how did it hunt with teeth like these? Steve compares Smilodon with its evolutionary cousin, the modern African lion.
If we compare the skull of a modern lion with our saber tooth, the thing that stands out right away are the teeth. Lions have pretty ferocious looking canine teeth, but they're nothing like these enormous scalpel-like saber canines that the Smilodon has that creates this vampiric overbite.
Today's lions and tigers primarily use their teeth for tearing flesh. They kill their prey by using their powerful jaws to crush their victims' necks. Experts think that the saber-toothed sharp canines were too fragile to be used in this way.
They didn't use those sabers like some knife-wielding maniac just going around with reckless abandon stabbing things. No, those sabers were precision tools, and they were used more like ice picks to deliver punctures to the throat of their prey.
A saber-toothed tiger could open its jaws extremely wide, allowing it to bite down into its prey with full force.
It would open its jaws really wide and strike a sharp, clean bite into the neck of the animal and watch that animal bleed out. And that's very different from how a lion hunts.
Smilodon was ferocious, but there was still an inherent danger in the way it hunted. If it bit down on bone, or its prey struggled too much, these super long teeth could fracture. Big cats can't regrow lost teeth. They only get 2 sets. So how did Sabertooth protect its precious fangs? Jack Tseng is an expert on prehistoric predators at the University of California. He thinks the secret to Smilodon's success began in infancy.
When you look at an adult Smilodon skull head-on, you see that it's quite intimidating, but it's equally interesting to think about how they grew to be so large and intimidating from kittens.
Jack uses CT scanning to investigate the rare skull of a juvenile sabertooth. It reveals something intriguing. This young cat had not 1, but 2 overlapping sets of vicious canines.
So you can see here on the screen, this is a photo of a juvenile specimen of a Smilodon with the milk canine already erupted. But also here we can see inside the bone of the face a section of the permanent canine.
The scans are a surprise. Most mammals lose their milk teeth before gaining their adult ones. But on a sabertooth, the baby canine has a special groove to allow the adult tooth to grow alongside it.
We really didn't know until our study exactly how long did those 2 teeth overlap. And one of the things we found is that the permanent canine and the milk canine coexisted in the mouth of a Smilodon for up to 11 months.
Jack thinks this double set of fangs acted as an insurance policy.
By having up to 4 sets of canines, so a pair of milk canines and a pair of adult canines, juvenile Smilodons may have been buffered in their ability to make mistakes because they had extra teeth to help them practice their hunting technique.
Young sabertooth could afford to make mistakes, but a fully grown adult had no second chances. It had to stop its prey from struggling to prevent its canines from snapping. Modern lions and tigers use their forearms to wrestle their prey to the ground. So Jack and his colleague Emily Bogner scan the humerus of an adult Smilodon fatalis sabertooth and compare it to that of a tiger.
These are our 3D computer models. On our left, we have our Smilodon humerus, and on our right, we have our tiger humerus.
This simulation shows what happens when the bones are put under stress. The tiger humerus lights up as green, indicating potential weak spots. The sabertooth humerus is much more robust.
So based on these results, they would have been able to handle their prey better, and the humerus would have been able to resist bending and twisting motions better. So what that means is their sabers would have been more protected because they would have been less prone to injury.
The bodies of the saber-tooth evolved for a very specific style of hunting. It had hugely powerful rear legs, which allowed the animal to ambush and leap onto its prey. Its massive forearms then pinned the animal down to prevent it from escaping. Only once it had completely immobilized its victim did it open its massive jaws and risk biting down, severing arteries and leaving its prey to bleed to death.
We typically hear the word saber-tooth, we go immediately to the skull and its outrageously long canines. But when you zoom out a little bit and look at more of the animal, you start to realize that rather than just being like a vampire, the rest of the body is actually quite robust and more in the profile of a wrestler.
Evolution gave the saber-tooth an incredible set of weaponry. Its saber-like teeth and hulking physique made it more powerful than any big cat alive today, capable of taking on far larger prey. So what did it hunt? The popular image of the saber-tooth is that of a predator locked in combat with huge Ice Age opponents, like the giant ground sloth. Outside in Project 23, Sean thinks he may have found the remains of this massive beast.
I actually just found some dermal ossicles, which are essentially bony marbles that grow in the sloth's skin. Even though it was a small fossil, that tells me later on when I get into the bulk of this deposit where I find very large remains, I'm going to see more of that sloth.
Giant sloths were huge plant-eating mammals weighing over a ton. They sported formidable claws at the end of powerful arms. A lumbering sloth, especially a trapped one, would have made a hearty meal. So could anything survive a saber-tooth attack? The team at La Brea have found the bones of an even bigger beast in the tar. A Columbian mammoth. It was less hairy than its woolly cousin, but far larger. It weighed nearly as much as a bus and could easily grow up to 3 meters tall, with tusks just as long. For many, a mammoth is a classic saber-tooth opponent. But was an animal this big really on a saber-tooth's menu? Excavators have discovered the remains of more than 30 mammoths at La Brea. Today, Stephanie is cleaning the skull of a bull mammoth nicknamed Zed, the same animal that kickstarted Project 23.
It's a slow and gradual process. We want to ensure that we don't rush it because the asphalt often obscures what we can see underneath.
Zed's skeleton is special. It's almost 80% complete. The skull is upside down. These are actually the mammoth's enormous back teeth. Most of the head is encased in plaster to protect the fragile bone. Columbian mammoths like Zed were very different to their woolly cousins, who lived further north, closer to the massive ice sheets. They preferred the milder environment of California.
This mammoth, it probably was not woolly because down here in Southern California, we didn't have the same sort of glaciation as at higher latitudes. So rather, this mammoth, it was obviously large, and it was more of a savanna dweller.
Excavators have discovered that Zed was in his late 40s when he died. Mammoths lived on average to about 60, but there's no evidence so far that he was torn apart by a hungry saber-tooth. It looked like he died in a stream at La Brea around 37,000 years ago, perhaps as a result of a fight with another bull elephant. Paleontologist Steve Brussati thinks that the Californian saber-tooth would have avoided prey this big.
One trope that you see quite a bit in museum exhibits, in films, is this face-off between a saber-toothed tiger and a mammoth, like it's Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty. But that probably didn't happen very much.
Saber-tooths use their powerful front legs to wrestle their prey to the ground. A Columbian mammoth like Zed would have been too big and dangerous an opponent.
And they were actually bigger than woolly mammoths. So they would have been even bigger than today's elephants. Very challenging prey to take down, even for something as fearsome as a saber-toothed tiger. So normally saber-toothed tigers would probably eat things like bison and deer and tapirs, smaller prey.
Analysis of the tooth enamel of Californian saber-toothed cats appears to confirm that they prefer to eat smaller herbivores. The enamel contains radioactive traces of plants consumed by their prey. The results show how saber-tooths were big game hunters, feasting on bison and deer, animals that grazed on the grasses of California. Only a very small mammoth would have been worth the risk.
And there are fossils that show this. There is a cave in Texas. It's a den of not Smilodon, but a different saber-toothed cat called Homotherium. And in its den, strewn about, are the bones of young Columbian mammoths. And those bones are scratched and pitted and really just demolished with the bite marks that match the teeth of the Homotherium. So there were times, at least sometimes, where some saber-toothed cats did eat some mammoths, but this was probably not the norm.
Discoveries like these transform how we see the saber-tooth. They reveal a very different kind of predator to the one of Hollywood legend. But figuring out how this prehistoric cat behaved is an even greater challenge. The popular image of the saber-tooth is that of a lone killer, much like today's tigers. Now, new evidence is starting to point to a more social animal. Hidden among the many fossils dug up from La Brea, investigators find the pelvis of a Smilodon fatalis saber-tooth. Its left-hand hip socket looked perfectly healthy, but on the other side, the joint was almost destroyed, with a gaping hole in the surface and the edge of the socket dented like a crater rim. It looks like a debilitating injury, likely to have caused pain and severely limited movement. In a finely tuned hunting machine like the saber-tooth, this should have been a death sentence. But this one grew to a ripe old age. How is this possible? Myrene takes a closer look at this strange specimen. For more than a century, scientists thought that the extreme damage to this bone was the result of a hunting injury, like a fracture.
Hunting is a dangerous activity, and saber-tooths definitely hunted. So the idea was that this particular saber-tooth that had this sit bone probably was hunting, got hurt, and maybe the hip area got infected, and the infection reached the bone and caused the bony growth that we see here. However, recently, we collaborated to CT scan this specimen, and the CT scans revealed no evidence of fracture.
There are more than 5,000 saber-tooth bones at La Brea that bear the scars of injuries. But Myrene thinks this one has the hallmarks of a genetic disorder.
So this is something that's called hip dysplasia, which we still have in our dogs and cats today. Typically, the ball of the femur would fit nicely into the socket of the hip bone, and they kind of co-develop that way. However, in this case, the socket of the hip bone never truly developed.
Saber-toothed cats relied on powerful hips to ambush their prey, but this one walked with a limp.
This animal probably could not have moved very well, at least later in its life, and it probably had trouble using its hind limbs to hunt prey.
Myrene thinks that this animal could be evidence that saber-tooths live together in prides like lions.
In order to be able to continue feeding on large prey to sustain its growth to adulthood, it probably had some help, and possibly from a family group.
It's hard to determine the social behavior of a species from bones alone. But animals who live in family groups usually hunt together. Excavators at La Brea have discovered 4,000 direwolves here. These huge prehistoric predators hunted in packs, just like their living cousins. The large number of saber-tooths found at La Brea could be evidence that they did the same.
We have over 2,000 individuals of Smilodon. The large numbers that we recover from here are taken as evidence that they were social. Say you have a large herbivore that is entrapped in an asphalt seep, and if you were a saber-tooth and you had some sort of social behavior, then it's likely that you would be roaming around with your family group and come across this herbivore and be entrapped together.
In New York, comparative anatomist Joy Reidenberg from the Icahn School of Medicine investigates if Smilodon shared another aspect of its behavior with today's big cats: the ability to roar.
Lions and tigers roar as a form of communication. They're informing other lions or tigers in the area that this is their territory and others should stay out. Sometimes they also roar to call in a coalition partner. So if lions, for example, are hunting with maybe a brother, they will call that other partner in for the hunt.
The key to the lion's roar is the larynx, or voice box. Unlike many other cats, the lion's larynx is a flexible connection to the skull via a bone called the hyoid. A powerful set of muscles can pull the larynx deep down into the chest, allowing the lion to generate low-frequency pulses of sound, louder than a lawnmower, which can be heard up to 8 kilometers away.
Lions and tigers roar with a very large larynx that has very large vocal folds. And the thicker those folds are, the lower the frequency. I've been around lions roaring, and my whole chest resonates when I hear that sound. I feel it in my body because the frequency is so low. Domestic cats have a very small larynx, and their vocal folds are much more delicate compared to a lion. So they're not capable of roaring because the folds just aren't big enough.
So did the North American saber-tooth share the same physiology?
We don't know what kind of larynx Smilodon had because the larynx, being a soft tissue, doesn't fossilize. The closest we can come is to look at the bones that move the larynx back and forth. Those bones are called the hyoid bones.
Some investigators believe that a set of delicate saber-tooth hyoid bones found at La Brea are similar to those in a lion. If true, then the saber-tooth might have been a much more social predator than previously imagined.
If they had the ability to roar, it might be an indication of social cohesion.
Discoveries like this reveal that the saber-tooth was the king of the Ice Age megabeasts. But there is a mystery. Saber-tooth disappeared from La Brea around 10,000 years ago. A story that's repeated across the world. Why do they no longer prowl the Americas today? At La Brea, excavators find traces of another strange feline. A species called Homotherium, also known as the scimitar cat.
This is a fragment of a canine of Homotherium. These are various, toe bones.
Compared to Smilodon, the scimitar cat is almost invisible at La Brea.
This is all we have of Homotherium at the La Brea Tar Pits thus far, which suggests that they may have been around, but they were not around in great numbers.
The lack of finds here is deceptive. The scimitar cat was among the most successful of all the saber-toothed cats. This beast has slightly shorter fangs than its Californian cousin, but made up for it in size. Standing taller than the average Smilodon fatalis, and weighing in at 190 kilos, it was also much more widespread. While Smilodons stayed home in the Americas, the scimitar cat lived all over the northern hemisphere, from sunny Texas to chilly France. Why was this animal so successful? And why, like Smilodon, does it no longer roam the globe today? Ornella Bertrand from Edinburgh University is an expert on the evolution of mammals. She compares these two monster cats. One reason why paleontologists find fewer scimitar cats in California is that these animals preferred a different habitat.
Les smilodons et les félins à cimeterre ne vivaient pas vraiment dans les mêmes environnements. Les smilodons préféraient les environnements de forêt, ils vivaient plus au sud, donc pas dans des environnements très froids, tandis que les félins à cimeterre, eux, ils vivaient plus dans des environnements où on avait les mammouths laineux, donc les steppes, toundra, etc. Donc plus des environnements ouverts.
Ornella thinks that each cat was perfectly adapted to suit its chosen environment.
Le smilodon était beaucoup plus robuste, c'était un animal assez large qui courait probablement sur des petites distances, pas très longtemps. Tandis que le félin à dents de scimitar, lui, il était un peu plus long, il avait un museau un petit peu plus long, il avait des pattes avant qui étaient plus longues que celles arrière. C'était un animal qui faisait plutôt de la course de fond et pas des sprints.
Scientists used to think that in Europe, scimitar cats went extinct around 300,000 years ago, well before Smilodon. But the recent discovery of a jawbone from the North Sea has cast doubt on this theory. It dates to around 28,000 years ago and shows that the scimitar cats were still alive and well here. It's now increasingly likely that both saber-toothed cats disappeared around the same time. Why did these two animals that preferred such different habitats share the same fate at the same time? Saber-toothed cats weren't the only animals to vanish 10,000 years ago. The end of the Ice Age saw mass extinctions all over the globe. But unlike the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, this one eliminated only big mammals. Mammoths, woolly rhinos, ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats all disappeared. The extinction of the Ice Age megabeasts is one of the greatest mysteries of paleontology. Some scientists blame climate change. The Ice Age was not the single big freeze of popular imagination. Temperatures fluctuated. Some species may have been unable to adapt fast enough to changes in their habitats. But why did this extinction primarily affect big mammals? One of many paleontologists with a disturbing theory is Steve Brusatte. He thinks the downfall of the saber-tooth coincides with the rise of another species, humans. The exact date when humans arrived in North America is hotly contested. But radiocarbon dating shows that people overlapped with Smilodon by at least 2,000 to 3,000 years.
The last saber-toothed tigers, the last Smilodons, died out about 10,000 years ago, so really, really recently. And at that time, there had already been humans that had come to North America and South America where they lived, and it was probably the activity of those humans, of our ancestors, that ultimately led to the demise of the saber-tooths.
Humans and big cats are both apex predators and natural rivals. There's no evidence that people deliberately wiped out these cats. But one theory is that modern humans decimated the big herbivores that big cats relied on for food. Huge mammals like Columbian mammoths had never encountered people before, and perhaps didn't see them as a threat. Steve thinks our impact was both insidious and deadly.
A number of species of large mammals all died out around the same time, about 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last glacial pulse of the Ice Age. And that's not to say that we overhunted everything, we killed everything in that sort of direct murderous way. That was maybe part of it. But we had such a profound effect on the environment wherever we went. And what we see in the fossil record is as humans migrated around the world, big mammals died soon afterwards.
The evidence is circumstantial, but what is clear is that humans were able to change their environment in ways that no other animal had ever been able to do. Many scientists believe that humans disrupted an already stressed ecosystem.
Yes, there were climate changes happening. The Ice Age was changing. The glaciers were melting. It was becoming warmer, but that had happened so many times before. But what was different about this time there were humans around. So it was maybe that 1-2 punch of humans hunting these animals, changing their environment, changing their ranges, hunting their prey species, along with the climate changes that conspired together to doom the saber-toothed tiger.
So why did big cats like lions and tigers survive? The answer could lie not with the saber-tooth's final days, but its earliest beginnings. The Alf Museum in Claremont, a few miles outside La Brea, is home to an astonishing collection of fossils that spans almost the entire history of life on Earth. The finds include the remains of once mighty dinosaurs. There are more than 170,000 specimens here. Hidden deep inside the museum's vault lie saber-tooth's surprising ancestors.
This is the Smilodon, a California saber-tooth, probably the most well-known of all the saber-tooths, but we certainly have many other saber-tooths from various other points in time.
Mammals with saber-like teeth have evolved at least 4 times in the history of our planet. Paleontologists call this convergent evolution, when unrelated animals develop the same features or adaptation independently.
What we have in front of us are what I would call precursors to the saber-toothed Smilodon. This Smilodon is from tens of thousands of years ago, and these are much older, so from about 30 to 45 million years ago.
Animals like these, with highly specialized adaptations, are often remarkably successful.
The evolutionary advantage of having a long saber tooth is that, well, you basically have 2 large stabbing knives at the front of your skull. This adaptation makes them the apex predator in their respective environments.
But specialists like the saber-tooth are also among the most vulnerable to change. Smaller, less specialized animals, like modern-day coyotes or raccoons, are better able to adapt to a changing world.
They can eat basically whatever they wish. So a raccoon can subsist on, modern-day human trash. However, larger-bodied carnivores, they need to eat a lot. Smilodon was specialized in that way, in that it needed large-bodied prey in order to survive.
The saber-tooth had evolved as an ambush predator. In Instead of chasing its prey down like a modern lion, it lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce upon its unsuspecting prey, which it then dispatched with its vicious fangs. One theory is that the saber-tooth struggled as the larger-bodied herbivores it preyed on started to decline. The same massive teeth that brought this beast to the top of the food chain may ultimately have sealed its fate.
Every species has an ending, and part of that has to do with their specialization. So if your prey species that you specialize on goes extinct, then you probably will go extinct as well.
Today, the saber-tooth is gone. All that remains of this magnificent predator is their astonishing fossils from places like La Brea. But the final chapter to this story may not be written. Myrene believes that the world may not have seen the last of the saber-tooth.
I think that even though we no longer have these specific saber-toothed cats, given that this specialization repeatedly arose over millions of years in different branches of the mammalian family tree, I think that there's a good chance that our descendants might see a saber-toothed cat or something like it in the far future.
A highly successful apex predator, honed by millions of years of evolution. Smilodon fatalis was a wily hunter who used both skill and brawn to ambush its prey, and a much more social animal than we ever imagined. The supersized fangs that made the saber-tooth the king of the Ice Age also doomed it to extinction. But this lost beast is a true superstar who deserves its place on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and may one day prowl these streets, or others like it, again. Buried in a cliff on the shores of Chesapeake Bay, paleontologists search for clues to the biggest and baddest shark that ever lived.
Oh my goodness.
Megalodon.
Megalodon, in my mind, is kind of on par with T-Rex.
The largest predatory shark of all time. 20 meters long. With a bite force 10 times more powerful than a great white shark, Megalodon was the ultimate ocean predator. The stuff of nightmares.
Stirs in us this sort of primordial fear we wouldn't have a chance against if we were in its environment.
How did a shark grow so big? What did this monster really look like? And why did it vanish from the oceans almost without trace?
You'd think it would be the king of the ocean. So why did it disappear?
Now scientists hunt for answers. Scouring the globe for massive fossils.
Looks like we have a sizable tooth here.
And using innovative technology to piece together a monster-sized puzzle.
By using all these different components, we were able to create the best available model to date.
To solve the mystery of the Megalodon, we'll resurrect the greatest shark that ever lived. Diving inside its jaws, we will reveal the terrifying reality of this prehistoric killing machine. The Calvert Cliffs in the eastern United States are a fossil hunter's paradise. They lie in the state of Maryland, on the rugged coastline of Chesapeake Bay. Here the water is clear and deep, and the shore is dotted with marine fossils.
The waves have calmed down a little bit over here, so a little bit easier collecting.
Paleontologist Dr. Stephen Godfrey and Dr. Victor Perez from the Calvert Marine Museum are experts on prehistoric sharks.
Stingray tooth. Yeah, I found a little chunk like that.
For them, these imposing cliffs offer a remarkable portal into the past.
We have 25 miles of cliffs, and those cliffs encapsulate time from about 20 million years ago to about 8 million years ago.
By studying the diversity of fossils in here, we can tell a lot about the ecosystem at that time, you know, who was living here and who was preying on what.
The Calvert Cliffs have produced many incredible finds. But today, Stephen and Victor are on the hunt for the remains of one of the greatest sharks that ever lived.
Waves have definitely picked up.
The layers of sediment that form the Calvert Cliffs today were once part of the seabed of an ancient shallow bay. Among the creatures inhabiting these waters was one of the biggest and baddest fish to ever swim our oceans. A monstrous shark of almost mythical proportions, Megalodon. All that is left of this lost beast are rare fossils, including its enormous and terrifying teeth. What was this gigantic predator? And why is it no longer swimming here today? Scientists know surprisingly little about the mighty Megalodon. The sea is constantly washing away the cliffs here, revealing a variety of marine fossils. Rich hunting grounds for paleontologists like Stephen and Victor.
Here's a piece of baleen whale lower jaw.
But prehistoric sharks are much harder to track down. Sharks are mostly made of soft tissue, which decays quickly. Their teeth are almost all that survive after millions of years.
Looks like this is a small tooth from a gray shark.
But it's a much bigger tooth that they're hoping to find.
Ah. Looks like we have a sizable tooth here, probably from Megalodon.
Oh my goodness.
It's definitely been in the water for a little while because we can see the enamel's peeled off and it's slightly discolored, but definitely a cool find for the day.
Amazing.
Scientists think that Megalodon might have had over 200 megateeth in its jaws. Its teeth were not rooted to the jawbone, but could move through the soft tissue of the gums. Sliding like a conveyor belt, the back teeth constantly grew forward, ejecting the front row from the shark's mouth. With an endless supply, Megalodon shed tens of thousands of teeth in its lifetime. Sinking to the ocean floor, they were preserved in layers of sand and became fossilized.
That's proof that they were living in this shallow ocean that flooded over this area. And just like modern sharks, they were shedding teeth, and those teeth then were sinking to the bottom.
Megalodon's fossilized teeth are vital pieces of evidence for investigators trying to solve the mysteries that surround this prehistoric fish. Their size is enormous.
Here is a modern tooth from a great white shark. Megalodon is about 4 times the size in terms of linear dimensions than the great white shark. So we all know that great white sharks are fearsome sharks. So I don't know what term we would use to describe Megalodon.
Megalodon's huge teeth reveal that it was a monster-sized shark. It was even named after these mega-sized teeth.
Megalodon means large or giant tooth, and so this animal was aptly named.
But just how big could Megalodon get? Here at the Calvert Marine Museum, Victor and his colleagues have reconstructed an entire Megalodon.
What we used is replicas of the most complete set of Megalodon teeth ever found. The original teeth were found in a phosphate mine in Florida, in what's called the Bone Valley region. Since this was an associated set of teeth, we can be really confident about how the teeth should be arranged in the jaw.
By comparing the teeth arrangement with that found in some modern sharks, scientists estimate that Megalodon's jaw could be nearly 2 meters wide, big enough to swallow a great white shark whole. The teeth in an adult Megalodon's jaw vary in size depending on their position in its mouth. The teeth at the front of its jaw are the largest of any shark that has ever lived. Victor uses his tooth fossil evidence, along with other finds from around the world, to come up with a new calculation to estimate the length of Megalodon.
This tooth is really special to me. This was one that I actually found myself, and this is the largest Megalodon tooth I've ever found along the Calvert Cliffs.
Given that Megalodon's teeth are the largest shark teeth ever found, just how big could this shark have been?
Last year, I published a paper where, rather than using the height of the tooth, we used the width of the tooth. Comparing the width of the set of teeth from the fossil to our modern great white shark, we can come up with an estimate. So for this particular individual, the estimate was actually about 52 feet in length, around 16 meters in length. So a pretty large shark, but not the largest Megalodon ever found. Just based off the size of the teeth, we know that it was the largest shark to ever live, but there are still many unanswered questions about Megalodon.
Megalodon was bigger than any shark in history. But what did this megafish actually look like? Unlike most vertebrates, a shark's skeleton isn't made of bone. The flesh and skin of a shark are wrapped around soft tissue called cartilage, which, unlike bone, disintegrates when a shark dies. This makes it extremely difficult to understand what a prehistoric shark looked like. So scientists must use the evidence they have and turn to modern-day species for clues. Megalodon was an evolutionary dead end, with no descendants nor surviving ancestors for comparison. Its main living relatives are from the order of the mackerel sharks, like the thresher shark, the megamouth, the mako, and the great white. Which mackerel shark did Megalodon most likely resemble? In New York, comparative anatomist and marine biologist Joy Reidenberg works at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. She thinks we can get an idea of what Megalodon looked like by comparing its fossilized teeth with those of its modern relatives.
This is a tooth of a great white shark, but it's very similar to the tooth of Megalodon. They're both triangular. They both have serrations. They're both very wide teeth. These teeth are similar because these two sharks did the same thing. They both preyed on the same kind of prey and in the same way.
Although separated by millions of years, the two sharks came up with the exact same adaptation. They likely occupied the same or very similar ecological niche. This allows scientists to use the great white shark as a living counterpart for Megalodon. Most Megalodon models, like this one at the Calvert Marine Museum, are based on the fearsome great white.
You can see the massive jaws here, which are basically an enlarged version of what we see in the living great white shark.
They've even supersized the cup-like cartilage structures that hold the shark's eyes.
As we move away from the skull, we have what looks like a crazy mess, but this is actually the gill rakers of the shark. Behind that, you can see the vertebral column extending all the way down to the end of the tail. Our model is about 37.5 feet long, so much larger than today's great white shark, which maximum recorded size is between about 21 and 23 feet in length.
This reconstruction is reliant on comparative anatomy and only one piece of solid evidence: Megalodon tooth fossils.
Since we do not have any fossilized skeletons of Megalodon that have ever been found, at least no complete ones, there is a lot of speculation about what these body proportions would have looked like.
A pioneering new research project could throw new light onto this mystery and help investigators reconstruct this long-lost monster more accurately.
I have always been fascinated about sharks because they play such important roles in marine ecosystems.
Paleobiologist Catalina Pimiento from Swansea University in the United Kingdom is part of an international team of scientists working to solve the mystery of what Megalodon really looked like. They're using innovative scanning technology to re-examine rare sections of a fossilized Megalodon spine.
I'm holding here a 3D printed scan of a Megalodon vertebral centrum, and it's part of a column that was found in Belgium from around 50 million years ago, and represents one of 2 vertebral columns that have been found for this extinct shark.
The vertebrae come from a very rare, almost complete spinal column. The original fossil was found in Belgium in the 1860s and lay in a drawer of a museum in Brussels until the 1990s. It was only recently that scientists realized the significance of the fossils.
Vertebral columns are very rare. So even though this has been studied before to an extent, today we have this new technology.
Catalina and her team are able to rebuild the spine of this prehistoric shark in a computer. By using pioneering 3D scans of each individual vertebra, they then combine this reconstructed spine with data from a complete set of Megalodon teeth. Finally, by using a modern-day great white shark as a living counterpart, the team have been able to build a scaled digital replica of Megalodon. They believe this is the most accurate representation to date of what the extinct monster shark would have looked like. Based on Catalina's data, Megalodon had a head the size of a van, a spine longer than a school bus, Megalodon is a predator of truly biblical proportions that could eat a great white shark for breakfast. How and why did this lost beast get so big? Dr. Victor Perez believes that juvenile tooth fossils found at the Calvert Cliffs might help explain why Megalodon grew into a monster.
In my right hand, we have our juvenile tooth, and in my left hand, we have an adult Megalodon tooth, both of which were found here locally along the Calvert Cliffs. Particularly on the north end of the cliffs, we do tend to find smaller Megalodon teeth on average. So some people have theorized that this area could have been a nursery for Megalodon.
Shark nurseries are often found in shallow coastal fringes, much like the ancient sea that once covered Chesapeake Bay. They are a marine refuge where baby and juvenile sharks live until adulthood. This can be over 20 years in some species.
There's a few different reasons why a shark would use a nursery habitat. It limits competition between adults and young individuals. Shallow lagoonal environments are more difficult for a large predator to get access to, and there's often an abundance of fish and other prey items that are ideal for these young developing sharks.
Nurseries are especially important for sharks that breed slowly and have few young, which experts think was the case for Megalodon. It is likely that Megalodon, after a lengthy pregnancy, gave birth to just 1 or 2 babies, which it left to fend for themselves. In the open water, they were easy prey for larger predators and may not have lasted very long. But sticking together in nurseries in shallow bays could give them shelter and plenty of food to fuel their growth. These waters would give baby Megalodon a greater chance of surviving and growing into a monstrous adult, and ultimately help the species to become the oceanic top gun for millions of years. Hints of that evolutionary advantage are captured in rare Megalodon fossils.
The biggest study that was done that had something to say about juvenile Megalodon wasn't looking at teeth, but rather looking at their vertebra.
Hidden in rare vertebrae fossil finds are some of the most tantalizing clues to how Megalodon got so big. The inside of a shark's vertebrae has growth rings, similar to those in a tree. A scientist from DePaul University in Chicago used these rings to figure out the size of a newborn Megalodon pup.
So what this researcher did, he looked at the very center of these Megalodon vertebrae, which would be the growth when it was first born. And he estimated the size of the shark from just that inner core of the vertebra. And they estimated that a newborn Megalodon would be about 2 meters in length, so between 6 and 7 feet in length.
That's the size of a large adult human. Megalodon's monster size at birth, combined with a high survival rate provided by nurseries, would have given the megapredator a major advantage over other fish from the very start of its life. Big was baked in at birth, but once young Megalodons reached adulthood and moved into the open ocean, how did they become the largest predatory shark that ever lived? Catalina Pimiento's 3D model could hold the answers. It reveals more than just what Megalodon looked like. Researchers are able to use the data to estimate Megalodon's body mass.
Mass is a very important trait because it allows us to infer other ecological properties such as prey intake, swimming speed, and metabolic demands.
Mass is an indicator of lifestyle. Using their data, the team calculates that this individual had an average cruising speed of 1.4 meters per second. That's faster than any living shark species. Megalodon would have expended vast amounts of energy to swim at such rapid speeds. It would require a sophisticated system to make such energy supplies available. Cold-blooded animals like reptiles and fish rely on their surroundings to heat their bodies, which means they prefer warmer climates. Warm-blooded animals maintain a constant body temperature and can more easily access colder regions. Megalodon was basically cold-blooded, but could use heat from its muscles to shield strategic organs, like its brain and eyes, from the cold.
Different lines of evidence have suggested that the Megalodon was capable of regulating the temperature of its most important organs.
Scientists named this crucial skill mesothermy.
Mesothermy would have allowed the Megalodon to explore cold waters and therefore find food not only in warm waters but also in cold habitats as well.
This remarkable adaptation made Megalodon a transoceanic predator, a killer who could feed on whatever and wherever it chose, allowing it to grow bigger and bigger. But this was not the only advantage of being able to regulate body temperature.
By being mesothermic, Megalodon would have been able to hunt more efficiently because it would have been able to have faster burst speeds, which is the kind of speed you need to hunt or to catch a prey. And because of that, they would have been able to catch faster prey.
Scientists have estimated that Megalodon was capable of burst speeds of around 23 miles per hour, as fast as a modern-day seal, making it a highly efficient killer that could strike with terrifying speed. And for Megalodon, that physiological advantage opened up opportunities, catapulting it towards gigantism.
Our previous research has suggested that mesothermy was a key trait that allowed the evolution of giantism in sharks.
Megalodon was an eating machine, without limits. But why haven't other predatory mesothermic shark species, like the great white, evolved to be as large as Megalodon? Could Megalodon's diet have contributed to its monster size? Megalodon's incredible physiology made it a relentless predator. But can the fossil evidence go even further? Can it reveal what Megalodon ate, and if its diet helped to make it the king of the ocean? Dr. Stephen Godfrey from the Calvert Marine Museum thinks a rare sample from his fossil collection could hold a clue. Close inspection of the fossil reveals crucial evidence on its surface.
We know from its size and shape that this is a fossilized dolphin vertebra, and we can tell that it's from just about the very end of the tail. It's the vertebrae that are just in front of the fluke that propels the dolphin through the water.
What Stephen has identified are a series of gouge marks on either side of the fossil that wouldn't normally be there.
The only way that you can get gouge marks like that on both sides angling the same way is if this vertebra, at some point in the life of this dolphin, became wedged between two adjacent megalodon teeth. So that means that a megalodon actually bit down on the end of the tail of this dolphin.
The evidence is clear. Megalodon was hunting dolphins. But that's not all the fossil can reveal.
But it didn't just bite once. Each one of these gouges represents a separate opening of the jaw and a forceful closure with the serrated cutting edge of the tooth gouging its way into the vertebra each time. So it's as though the megalodon is like saying to this dolphin, "You are never gonna get away from me alive."
This extraordinary find has revealed not only what Megalodon was hunting, but also how it dispatched its victims.
This is very suggestive of kind of an aggressive attack on the tail. And in a way that's not surprising because modern great white sharks will also attack dolphins this way.
Dolphins are large prey, so by biting down on its tail, the shark immobilizes its victim, which is then left to slowly bleed to death.
There's nothing very cheerful about this for the dolphin. You know, it's just the way Megalodon was. It was a macro predator.
Macro predators are killers that take down prey larger than themselves.
So this is a fossilized whale vertebra that was found along Calvert Cliffs. When we rotate this vertebra 180 degrees, you'll notice that this end is very different than the back end. This is the front end. This is really messed up. So what happened is, at some point in the life of this whale, it experienced a major traumatic event that forcefully broke the whole bottom half of the vertebra away from the rest of the centrum.
The injuries on this whalebone are catastrophic. Stephen suspects that this is no accidental injury.
There are several explanations for how that could have happened, but I think the best and most reasonable one is that this whale, at some point in its life, had an encounter with Megalodon. So I can imagine Megalodon coming up from below, ambushing this whale.
Incredibly, this whale's killer may have left behind a smoking gun.
What's also interesting about this vertebra is that immediately adjacent to it, in the sediment, was this single megalodon tooth was found. It was a spall fracture, which indicates that at some point in this tooth's existence, it struck a hard object like a bone of a whale, And the force of the bite was so powerful that it overcame the strength of the tip of the tooth and it broke it off. So again, this is circumstantial evidence. We can't know for sure if they're related to this trauma, but they were found together.
The fossil evidence hints at the massive size of prey that Megalodon was capable of taking on. Catalina Pimiento's 3D model also sheds light on the kind of prey Megalodon was eating.
Body mass also allows us to infer prey intake capabilities in two ways. First, we were able to estimate the stomach volume, and based on this volume, we were able to estimate how big of a prey the Megalodon could have fully consumed. Our 16-meter-long Megalodon model was capable of consuming prey as large as 8 meters and in as few as 5 bites.
Megalodon wasn't designed to snack on small fry.
We were able to estimate the energetic demands, the caloric intake required for this individual Megalodon to survive. The calculation suggests that a Megalodon needed 98,000 kilocalories per day.
Only one beast could provide enough energy for a hungry Megalodon. This monster shark was a whale killer. And the bigger Megalodon became, the more food it needed to sustain it. Hunting and killing calorific prey like a blubber-rich whale wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. With a bite 10 times more powerful than a great white, Megalodon was perfectly evolved for tackling large prey. As it went in for the kill, its jaws could shoot forwards and open to a vast size before sinking its teeth into its victim. And when shaking its head side to side, its teeth could saw into flesh, ripping off huge chunks of meat. With jaws like this, Megalodon was the ultimate ocean mega-predator. Was any marine creature safe from Megalodon? Incredibly, fossil evidence reveals that this shark wasn't even safe from its own kind. Stephen has discovered a Megalodon tooth fossil that has some tantalizing evidence scratched into the surface. But the detail is very fine, and he needs to treat the fossil to reveal what he believes to be an extraordinary encounter.
I'm going to whiten the fossil, and I'm going to do that by heating up this solid ammonium chloride with this burner.
The heated solid ammonium chloride turns into a powdery gas, which Stephen uses to temporarily coat the fossil.
You want to extract as much detail and information from the fossil as possible, and this is just one technique that we can apply to do that. Makes the detail on the surface of the tooth really pop, so we can see exactly what has happened to this tooth.
Will the technique reveal enough detail for him to read and interpret the evidence?
We can clearly see that the surface, the tongue side, the inside surface of this Megalodon tooth was scored when another Megalodon tooth raked the surface. So what's amazing is that you have all these serrations where one Megalodon tooth struck another Megalodon tooth, and in a way, Megalodon left its calling card, right, the serration marks, on another Megalodon tooth. So you can just imagine, right, two giant Megalodons kind of duking it out, having at each other, like face to face. I mean, that's just like apex predator against the most apex predator. That would have been spectacular.
Megalodon was a fearsome predator, a transoceanic monster that hunted down and dispatched whale-sized prey and even other rival Megalodons in a few powerful bites. It was at the top of its game for millions of years. Why is it no longer terrorizing the oceans today? The fossil record shows that between 2 and 3 million years ago, Megalodon disappeared. Unlike the dinosaurs, which were wiped out 66 million years ago, mighty Megalodon's disappearance wasn't linked to a sudden catastrophic event. Its extinction happened slowly over time. So what wiped out this monster-sized super predator?
Where did it go? Like, why did it become extinct? To me, that's really amazing that an animal that is like the top marine predator for arguably like 20 million years, the biggest, the baddest, the best, all of a sudden goes extinct.
A clue could lie with the rise of a shark we still fear today, the great white. Based on tooth fossils found around the world, Megalodon ruled the seas for over 13 million years and spread to nearly every ocean on the planet, competing with its smaller relative, the great white shark. But then, 2.6 million years ago, Megalodon disappeared from the fossil record, while the great white shark survives to this day. Why did the smaller fish win the evolutionary battle? Had Megalodon bitten off more than it could chew? Species extinctions that happen over time are due to a series of events. Could this have been the case for Megalodon? Stephen Godfrey believes that climate change might have been a factor. He hunts for clues hidden in the Calvert Cliffs.
When you look at this expanse of sedimentary rock, it all looks like it's pretty uniform, but in fact it isn't. Geologists have studied the composition of these sediments, and what they've learned is that there are different particle sizes and different combinations of sand, silt, and clay, which indicate that there are different water depths here responsible for the deposition of these different kinds of sediment.
The different layers reveal how changes in global temperature had a direct impact on sea levels. Shark nurseries are often found in shallow coastal areas. One theory suggests that falling sea levels radically altered the nursery habitats that Megalodon might have relied on to provide a safe haven for its pups.
If Megalodon did require a nursery area to birth its pups to survive, it would have had less options. And so it has been suggested that that was one of the reasons why Megalodon became extinct, because it just didn't have access to these shallow water environments where its pups could be protected.
But there's still a mystery. Shark species that lived at the same time as Megalodon and are still around today also use nurseries. Why were they able to survive this loss of habitat? Professor Joy Rodenberg believes climate change delivered a deadly double blow to Megalodon. It devastated both the habitat and sources of food that Megalodon had evolved to rely on.
Megalodon's big size was probably also its downfall. A big predator needs to prey on big prey. But if that prey species starts to dwindle in numbers, that leaves it less resource to feed off of. Or if there was some environmental change that moved that prey out of the area where Megalodon was, then it would also have less prey to feed on.
The Ice Age had a devastating impact on marine ecosystems. One estimate suggests that more than a third of all large marine creatures went extinct at that time, including a high percentage of the whale species, the large high-calorie prey that Megalodon had come to rely on to sustain its enormous body size. Had Megalodon become too specialized? A clue to support this theory is embedded in the tooth fossil evidence for both Megalodon and great white sharks.
Shark diets are revealed in their teeth. You can see chemicals in the teeth, and they reflect what the animal was eating.
Teeth of plant eaters low in the food chain contain a lot of zinc. Teeth of top predators, very little. This telltale clue in the tooth fossils is a vital piece of evidence for investigators trying to understand the lifestyle of a prehistoric animal.
Great white sharks and Megalodon both had low values of zinc. But as you look through the fossil record, what you start to see is Megalodon starts to get higher levels of zinc compared to great whites.
This change in zinc values in more recent Megalodon tooth fossils suggests it was eating smaller prey lower down the food chain, while at the same time, it was business as usual for Megalodon's neighbor, the great white.
Which one of these was more specialized and which one of these was more adaptable to change? Megalodon could really only eat very big prey to maintain its body size. Great whites could eat big prey and smaller prey. So they had a lot more variety that they could choose from. They were therefore more of a generalist and more adaptable to changes in the environment. And that's probably why they survive today and Megalodon doesn't.
Rivalry between great whites and Megalodon might have been the final blow for this monster predator. And when Megalodon disappeared 2 to 3 million years ago, the great white moved into pole position. It remains one of the world's most feared predators today.
The extinction of Megalodon boils down to 3 general areas: climate change, extinction of the prey on which it was feeding, and the evolution of competitors. It may not have been any one of these. It could have been a combination of any one of those, but we really don't know yet. In a way, that makes the study of Megalodon all that much more interesting. It's this fascinating mystery.
The mystery to exactly why Megalodon disappeared keeps imaginations alive. Some wonder, could this prehistoric fish still be swimming in the unknown depths of our oceans? It's a question that scientists like Stephen Godfrey get asked all the time.
I think people have a hard time letting Megalodon go because it was such an amazing predator that was so superbly well adapted and was so successful for so many millions of years. I mean, it was the top dog. We can't imagine, like, well, how is it possible for an animal that's at the apex of the food web to become extinct?
The ocean covers more than 70% of the Earth's surface. Yet more than 80% of this vast marine habitat has never been explored, mapped, or even seen. The deepest place on Earth plunges almost 11 kilometers below the ocean's surface.
It's actually quite believable for some people that these animals are still alive. Why? Because we don't know what's in the ocean. We haven't seen everything in the ocean. It's one of these unexplored areas, the last frontier.
Megalodon swam in the oceans for millions of years. It lived all over the world and was capable of traveling huge distances across warm and cold oceans. It could even descend to frigid ocean depths, fueling speculation that it really could still be out there.
Everyone wants to see the biggest shark that's out there. And if you think Jaws is big and then you hear about something that's got teeth that are this size, well, of course that's got to be more exciting, right?
A unique sighting came in 2021 when a group of sea passengers encountered a monstrous shark in the Atlantic Ocean.
Holy.
This footage shows a huge fish, but scientists confirmed it to be a harmless basking shark.
I do not think Megalodon is still out there today. There's absolutely zero evidence that this shark is still alive. There are no modern teeth washing up, only fossil teeth have been found.
The fossil record shows that Megalodon was widely distributed around the world for nearly 20 million years. But around 2 million years ago, the fossil trail ends. Experts are confident that Megalodon is no more.
We know it was very, very large, so the chances of us not being able to see it are very, very low. even if they were living in a very remote place, they would have need important size in this population to find mates and reproduce and sustain the population.
How do we know that Megalodon is in fact extinct? If the Megalodon that we know of from the fossil record, okay, that giant shark that feeds on whales, if it were still alive, we would not be wondering if it was still alive. We would know 100% that it was still alive.
If Megalodon were still alive today, our fishermen would be encountering Megalodon on a regular basis. Megalodon was inhabiting near-shore coastal environments, and these are the same environments that our fishermen are out day in and day out, chumming the waters. There would be definitive sightings of it.
As we continue to do research on Megalodon, we'll get closer, perhaps, to really understanding why this most amazingly well-adapted mackerel predator became extinct. No species is guaranteed to live forever if conditions change. Natural selection cannot take an organism, and if conditions change fast enough or the change is so great that they cannot adapt, then they will become extinct.
Megalodon was a terrifying predator that ruled the oceans for millions of years. The largest shark that has ever lived, with an almighty bite that could take down some of the biggest species on the planet. But it was a victim of its own success. A monster that grew too big, that was unable to successfully adapt to changes around it. Megalodon has disappeared from the depths of our oceans, and with it a planetary titan that deserves to be ranked as one of the most terrifying predators of all time. In the Australian outback, investigators discover an 8-million-year-old fossil.
Those teeth were not like any of the teeth that we were used to seeing.
A clue to the origins of Australia's most iconic extinct animal, the Tasmanian tiger.
I think this extinction is one of the most tragic extinctions, and that played out in front of human eyes.
Vilified as a bloodthirsty monster, humans hunted the Tasmanian tiger to extinction. But how much do we really know about this mysterious creature? Today, paleontologists are piecing together the incredible true story of the Tasmanian tiger. How did it hunt? How ferocious was it? And could it roam the earth once again?
Our goal with this project is to bring the Tasmanian tiger back from the dead.
To solve these mysteries, we will unearth the death pit of ancient buried secrets. We'll expose the fault lines of its hidden weakness and dive deep into the DNA of the past and maybe the future of Australia's most misunderstood lost beast. Tasmania, the wild and magical island off the southern coast of mainland Australia. It was here in the Tasmanian wilderness that the Tasmanian tiger once roamed, long before the European explorers of the 18th century. With jaws full of razor-sharp teeth and tiger stripes on its back, it was a marsupial carnivore that held its young in a pouch. But by the end of the 20th century, it was officially gone. Why was this magnificent marsupial labeled a blood-crazed killer and driven to extinction? What is the real story behind the myths of the Tasmanian tiger? In the 19th century, European settlers to Tasmania feared the Tasmanian tiger as a threat to their livestock.
Those Europeans started to hunt the Tasmanian tiger. They put out a bounty on it in certain parts of Australia.
The Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine and the Tasmanian wolf, was hunted to destruction.
The Tasmanian tiger is undoubtedly the coolest marsupial that ever lived. I mean, it looks like a wolf, it's got tiger stripes, it's an apex predator, and it is an absolute obscenity that this animal was hunted in the way that it was.
When humans killed the thylacine, we knew next to nothing about it. Not even where it came from.
What we're looking for is right around here somewhere.
Liz Reed from the University of Adelaide is a paleontologist with a special interest in prehistoric life here at Naracoorte. In this ancient wood, she's seeking out one of its little-known secrets.
It's almost impossible to see, but there's actually a really big, deep cave around here. I'll just check the GPS. Oh yeah, we're just about right on top of it. Ah, here it is.
Hidden beneath this hole is a network of caves. It is into these caverns that animals once fell from above. These ancient death traps are known as pitfalls.
You can see up there, that's the original entry point.
Now you're looking at it from underneath.
It's amazing that we're actually now in the bottom of a pitfall where animals fell in tens of thousands of years ago into a very dark trap. But for paleontologists, it's a bounty.
This is an amazing treasure trove. Old bones of animals that fell into these caves and could not get out.
The astounding thing about this site has always been, to me, how much bone is in here. You know, you really don't dig for long before you find a bone. It's really amazing. We're probably about 18 metres below the surface at this point in this part of the cave. Over time, we've had multiple episodes of animals falling in, more sediment falling in, until we've now got this enormous deposit. There's about 100 species of animals, ranging from very small animals through to enormous animals. This here is a femur of a kangaroo. You can see at the back there's a tiny little skull of a small extinct kangaroo just sitting there in the sediment.
All of these bones have a story to tell. But for Liz, one discovery stands out.
When you're scratching very gently and you hear that sound of enamel, you know that you've got a jaw or a skull.
Just beneath the death pit, Liz unearths a fossilized jawbone with sharp, triangular, almost shark-like teeth. The jawbone could only belong to one animal, a Tasmanian tiger that fell to its death here. But how is that possible? This cave is in mainland Australia, hundreds of kilometers away from Tasmania. What was this animal doing so far from home? What does its death in this cave tell us about the world in which it lived? Liz's first challenge is to work out how long this Tasmanian tiger jaw has been sitting here. Clues lie buried in the very walls of the cave where it was found.
This really just looks like a wall of dirt, and for most people they wonder what we get so excited about.
The layers in this wall represent different periods of time. Each layer has a slightly different color. Liz is able to find out the age of each layer with modern dating techniques. This in turn reveals the age of the bones themselves.
This particular thylacine fits right up in the top layer at the 216,000 years ago. This animal was wandering around the forest and unfortunately fell down into this cave.
The discovery of this extremely old jawbone is helping to rewrite the history of the Tasmanian tiger. Paleontologists are revealing that Tasmania was just one chapter in the thylacine story.
When we found thylacines, it did put them firmly in that context that their history goes a lot further back.
Today, Tasmania is separated from mainland Australia by some 240 kilometres of ocean. But during the last ice age, sea levels were lower, and a land bridge connected it to mainland Australia. Once upon a time, Tasmanian tigers roamed all over the entire Australian continent. Liz examines the bones from the caves in the lab at Naracoorte. She begins to piece together a picture of the animals that lived alongside the Tasmanian tiger.
These fossils absolutely give us a window into the past that we wouldn't normally have. The thylacine was part of a community of other animals, other mammals. We get to see where they lived, we get to see how they lived and what their neighbours were.
It seems that the Tasmanian tiger's neighbours were built with impressive dimensions.
This here's a tooth, and that animal is probably about 500 kilograms, herbivore. There's also a limb bone here of a young one, believe it or not. So that's a femur. And this animal was a marsupial carnivore and has this massive shearing tooth for slicing up flesh. This one over here is pretty exciting. It's a vertebra of a snake, impressive vertebra.
The bones reveal that here at Naracoorte, the Tasmanian tiger lived alongside huge beasts that are now extinct, known as megafauna. Among these leviathans were the rhinoceros-sized Diprotodon, the largest marsupial that ever lived. Short-faced kangaroos, so big it's not certain if they could even hop. Alongside them were lizards almost the size of large saltwater crocodiles, with venomous saliva, and savage marsupial lions with flick blades for claws and bolt cutters for teeth. Before its tragic end, the Tasmanian tiger once held its own among these giants as an apex predator for hundreds of thousands of years.
Indigenous people in Australia knew the Tasmanian tiger for a long time. They encountered it, they saw it, they drew pictures of it, they put the Tasmanian tiger into stories. It was part of their culture.
This view of the Tasmanian tiger changed dramatically with the arrival of Europeans in the 18th and 19th centuries.
When Europeans came to Australia, the Tasmanian tiger, it developed this reputation as something of a vampire, of this bloodthirsty monster that would come out at dusk and would hunt by literally drinking blood. And that led to a lot of fear.
The idea that the Tasmanian tiger was a savage hunter took hold. Even though Tasmanian tigers were only the size of a dog, their 46 teeth were quite unlike those of other marsupials. When threatened, they could open their jaws nearly 90 degrees. When biting down, the muscles could snap the jaws shut with striking force. Fearsome features that fueled its reputation as a formidable predator. But how deadly was the Tasmanian tiger? Joy Weidenberg is a comparative anatomist at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. For Joy, it's the anatomy and the bones themselves that can separate fact from fiction.
This is the skull of a Tasmanian tiger. It's an awesome predator.
It's the jaw that reveals a Tasmanian tiger as a true carnivore.
If we look here, we see these long canines that you expect in a predator, which it uses for puncturing its prey. What's interesting here is these little premolars, which it can use for grasping and holding the prey in its mouth. These are the teeth of an animal that can shear meat. It could actually slice using these teeth in the back. These teeth can slice across each other, kind of like a scissor.
It's these teeth that single the thylacine out.
It's actually what you might call a hypercarnivore, because it's adapted as a specialist for eating meat. And not just the meat, the muscle of the animal, but also the insides, the guts, the heart, the lungs, the fat, and even the blood. In fact, they were accused of being blood drinkers.
The Tasmanian tiger was accused of eating farmer sheep, and if there was an animal out there that they thought was going to be damaging productivity of farms, they decided they wanted to eradicate it.
Rewards were offered for those willing to hunt the Tasmanian tiger down. And by 1888, there was an official bounty. The government paid £1 per head for every dead Tasmanian tiger.
You can see with this animal here, it's actually got a bullet hole in the end of its nose from where it was shot as part of that collection for the bounty.
The Tasmanian tiger became known as the marsupial wolf. Wolves were known as sheep killers, and the very name fueled the fears of the farmers. But could the Tasmanian tiger really hunt sheep like a wolf? Joy investigates the bones of the two animals to see if a comparison will provide the answer.
This is a wolf skull. The wolf is a very different type of predator. They're both predators. They're both chasing after prey that they're going to eat the meat from. But this hypercarnivore only eats meat. This carnivore can bring down prey that's much bigger than it, and it also can break its bones.
The wolf's skull enables it to tackle larger prey than the Tasmanian tiger could.
The Tasmanian tiger had powerful muscles back here, had a very strong bite, but the skull is actually more fragile and delicate in this area. So even though it could pull its jaw with a lot of force, it probably couldn't break any bones. If we take the lower jaw off, you can see just how narrow this part is, right here. You can imagine if this animal tried to bring down something bigger than it, it could actually break off the front of its muzzle.
The body of the Tasmanian tiger had something of the shape of the wolf, but Joy can tell it must have moved very differently.
It didn't really hunt like a wolf. Wolves hunt in packs. They're pursuit predators. They chase after their prey.
A clue as to why the Tasmanian tiger can't pursue its prey like the wolf lies hidden in the very structure of its bones.
What we're looking at here is the full skeleton of a Tasmanian tiger. But what I want to focus on is just the forearms. So this is the Tasmanian tiger's elbow. What's interesting is that this elbow can supinate. Supinate means turning the palm upward. So that ability to turn it back and forth means that the Tasmanian tiger could put its paw up.
This is not something we see in the wolf.
The wolf's paws are always down so it can run with stability, but the Tasmanian tiger actually can roll one bone over the other. And we know that because there's a big gap between these two bones.
This extra mobility in the elbow and wrist makes the Tasmanian tiger less steady on the run.
This destabilizes the front leg and makes it a very poor pursuit predator. It could not hunt like a wolf.
Why did the Tasmanian tiger need this bendiness in the elbow and wrist? The answer lies with its remarkable birth.
We're looking at the image of the skeleton of a Tasmanian tiger pup. In other words, something that would have been in the pouch, a joey. When this Tasmanian tiger pup was first born, it had to climb its way to get into the pouch. In order to do that, it needed to be able to move its forearms in many different directions as it was grasping and pulling at the fur and climbing over the top of the pouch. So the ability to pull and grab like this, that's supination, when you pull the hands up like this.
The Tasmanian tiger's flexible forearms enabled it to make that first journey from the birth canal to the safety of the pouch, but at a price.
So this specific feature of being able to supinate limits its ability to run like a wolf.
There is more evidence that the Tasmanian tiger isn't built to be a natural sheep killer. Their skulls were lightly built and fragile. When researchers simulate the forces of tackling large prey like sheep, they find the stresses are so high that the Tasmanian tiger's skull or jaw might crack. People might have demonized the Tasmanian tiger as a sheep killer, but in reality, it's more likely that this predator was hunting animals smaller than itself in the wild, like bandicoots and wallabies.
It's even more tragic that they were wrongly persecuted and hunted to extinction for something they probably played absolutely no role in.
The bounty program was a resounding success. By the 20th century, there were fewer and fewer sightings of the Tasmanian tiger. This one, now so rare that it was in a zoo, was among the last known Tasmanian tigers still alive.
There is video footage that you can watch of that Tasmanian tiger. While it was still alive, people would go to the zoo and see this animal. It was like a zombie animal. It was like the living dead. It was alive, yes, but once it went, everybody knew the species would go with it.
For hundreds of thousands of years, the Tasmanian tiger roamed the Australian continent as an apex predator. But how far back does its story actually go?
It's always wonderful just to get out, spend some time in the outback, take in the sensations of being out bush.
Paleontologist Adam Yates is heading to Alcoota in the Northern Territory. The fossil beds at Alcoota are rewriting the whole backstory of the Tasmanian tiger.
The bone bed of Alcoota, or bone beds, are absolutely exceptional. The area is approximately the size of 2 football fields, and it is just bone packed on top of bone, packed on top of bone. And given the density in the area, we estimate that there may be 3,000 animals buried at this site, which is utterly exceptional.
The team's greatest challenge is to get the bones out intact. They have uncovered a skull of the extinct Placiodon, a beast similar to a massive wombat and the size of a bull. It requires exquisite care to extract it. The other bones that are crammed around it make this task even more difficult.
This long bone here looks really jammed in against the skull.
It is.
It's pretty tricky, it's pretty tight.
It's very tight, yeah. So for the moment, we uncover as much of the bone, get as much of the sediment away as we can, and harden the skull as best we can.
Okay.
This giant skull needs gluing together before it's moved, otherwise it will fall apart like cornflakes.
Any attempt to lift the bone straight out the ground would basically result in it shattering. The sediment they're buried in is rich in clay. So whenever that clay gets wet, it swells. Whenever it dries, it shrinks. So these bones have been through millennia of swell-shrink cycles, shattering them entirely. The only fact that they're encased underground that they stay together at all.
All of these discoveries are special, but for Adam, one find is truly historic.
This is the spot, right here. We were digging in this newly exposed pit, digging, and it was full of bone, absolutely full of bone. It wasn't very long before something really quite magical, exciting showed up. First little piece was a little bit of jaw with 3 perfect teeth in it. And those teeth were not like any of the teeth that we were used to seeing. The instant I saw those teeth, I knew we'd had something very special.
The jawbone that Adam found is puzzling. The teeth have pointed, shearing edges, typical of a carnivore. They looked like those of a Tasmanian tiger, but that should be impossible. Tasmanian tigers may have roamed these lands 2 million years ago, but this site is 4 times older. So what is this animal?
They have some subtle differences. There are a few bumps, cusps, and also the width of the molars. And a lot of teeth showed signs of heavy wear and breakage, which told us that this animal was being really tough on its teeth. It was biting into something very hard, tooth-breakingly hard.
It was as if this animal had been bone crunching. The Tasmanian tiger, as a pure meat eater, didn't have the teeth for that. The bones Adam found are exceptionally rare. They are from an animal that had only ever been found once before, 60 years ago at this very site. A forerunner of the Tasmanian tiger.
This is a cast of the original specimen found in 1962. This creature was given the name Thylacinus potens, the powerful thylacine. So this was the first indication that there were extinct forerunners to the Tasmanian tiger that lived in Australia with a deep history going far back into geological time.
Adam's work here is helping to reconstruct the Tasmanian tiger's remarkable family tree. The shoulder height of a Tasmanian tiger was around 50 to 70 centimeters tall. The potens was bulkier, weighing in at more than 35 kilograms. It's a distant relative of the Tasmanian tiger and lived around 8 million years ago. Their family tree goes back over 25 million years, with the oldest relative not much bigger than a weasel. The Tasmanian tiger's forebears have been long extinct. Once the potens died out, the Tasmanian tiger would end up being the very last of its kind. Paleontologists are gradually piecing together the astonishing story of the Tasmanian tiger. But there's another mystery. No Tasmanian tiger bones from the past 3,000 years have been found on mainland Australia. They're all older. Why? Tens of thousands of years ago, the Tasmanian tiger lived all over the entire Australian continent. But when the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose, Tasmania was cut off. Within 9,000 years, it became the only place in the world where Tasmanian tigers lived. They had all but disappeared from the mainland. Why did thylacines thrive in Tasmania and die out in mainland Australia? What happened to the Tasmanian tiger here? Professor Andrew Pask, he has come to the Melbourne Museum to identify old Tasmanian tiger specimens.
Two that I think will be great for this project.
Oh, wow. Oh, they look absolutely fantastic. They're probably collected around the time of when they were being hunted for the bounty.
Andrew looks to see if there's viable DNA still left in the pelts.
These are beautifully preserved. You can see the coloration and those rich stripes. This is pretty much what the pelt would have looked like, you know, on the living animal. Depending on the way that that pelt was looked after and preserved and how it's been kept for the last 100 years, it varies in how badly broken up that DNA is into lots of tiny pieces.
DNA deteriorates with age, but it can provide an extraordinary window into the world of the Tasmanian tiger's hidden past.
One of the amazing things we can do with the thylacine DNA is you can have a look back in time. You can actually use it to understand what the population size was. And it's like looking at the rings of a tree. You can do the same thing with the DNA from a species and understand about what that population size might have been going back 100,000 or 200,000 years.
Andrew can examine the differences in the chromosome pairs from individual specimens to estimate how many Tasmanian tigers there were in the past.
So it sounds like magic, but it's actually just very complicated maths and supercomputers that can examine all of that DNA and give really good predictions about what those population sizes would have been going back in time.
Andrew uncovers something unexpected. The Tasmanian tiger population was already in decline over 15,000 years ago, much earlier than had been thought. This meant that it was vulnerable to any new environmental shock. But what shock was it that ultimately wiped out the thylacine from mainland Australia? Paleontologist Steve Brussati from the University of Edinburgh examines the evidence.
There may have been viruses that played a role. There was climate change, environmental change, change in land usage, and maybe there was competition from another type of predator. This here is a dingo. There's a lot of dingoes in Australia today. They are seen as this part of Australia, this part of Australian ecosystems, these signature down under mammals. When the dingo arrived in Australia, the Tasmanian tiger was the top predator across much of the continent. But these dingoes, they were fast, they were smart, they could grow really fast. And so maybe, just maybe, it was those dingoes that played part of a role in the wasting away of the Tasmanian tiger.
Did the dingo outcompete the Tasmanian tiger? Joy Reidenberg believes there are clues in the anatomies of the two animals.
When we compare these two animals, what we see is a big difference in terms of whether they're specialists or generalists. The Tasmanian tiger is a specialist. It is specialized for eating meat. These teeth are for slicing meat. When we look at the dingo, we see that it can do a lot more than just slice meat. So it's more of a generalist. Take a look in particular at these very large molars. They're really wide. They have a lot of surface area, and this allows them to crush bones. I could imagine it grabbing the bones of some carcass that it found and cracking them open and licking the marrow out. That's scavenging.
These differences may have created a competitive advantage.
When times get difficult, you want to put your money on the generalist, not the specialist, because the generalist can adapt to any change in the environment. A specialist, on the other hand, is very good at what it does, but it only does that one thing. So if things change, all of a sudden it's out of luck, and this is the animal that will go extinct.
Was being a specialist meat eater the Tasmanian tiger's undoing? If so, it wasn't just about the teeth.
If you look at the dingo skull shape, overall it's a more robust skull. The dingo had a much stronger muzzle, and the wider spacing of the teeth and the bracing of this muzzle meant that it was less likely to break when it was grappling with prey.
It looks like the bite of the Tasmanian tiger was over twice as powerful as the bite of a dingo. But with a skull so vulnerable, it was probably limited to smaller prey, like birds and small mammals. The dingo, with its sturdy skull, can tackle prey larger than itself, like kangaroos or sheep. And while the Tasmanian tiger may have been primarily a lone hunter, dingoes hunt in packs, making them more efficient killers.
It seems that the dingo probably outcompeted the thylacine on the mainland. But fortunately, the dingo never made it across into Tasmania before that ocean level rose and isolated Tasmania. And so in Tasmania, we have this beautiful untouched population of thylacines that was able to survive in that environment right the way through into modern times.
The Tasmanian tiger thrived in Tasmania until the very first Europeans arrived in the 17th century. Within 300 years, it would be game over. On one cold night in 1936, after being left outside its den, the last known Tasmanian tiger died of exposure. It was the end of 25 million years of evolution. Is the Tasmanian tiger's story really at an end? For Andrew Pask, DNA is not just a window onto the past, but a crucible for the future. His is an audacious mission, one that, until now, has existed only as fantasy.
Our goal with this project is to bring the Tasmanian tiger back from the dead. Since the days of Jurassic Park, this has always been something that sat in the realm of science fiction, and it's only been within the last 10, 15 years that this has become an actual reality, that we can do this.
Andrew hopes that this specimen is the key to unlocking his long-held ambitions.
This will be the one that underpins the whole de-extinction effort.
Suspended in this museum jar is 113-year-old thylacine pouch young specimen C5757.
It was quite young, maybe a month old, and, you know, sort of about this big in size.
This Tasmanian tiger pup was still growing in the pouch when its mother was killed. Despite its age, much of its DNA is remarkably intact. It was a stroke of luck. Andrew could have found the Holy Grail for creating a blueprint to build a Tasmanian tiger. Growing and maintaining a highly developed organism like a Tasmanian tiger is an extremely complex biological problem. Inside the cells of the animal, 7 pairs of chromosomes, roughly a third of what humans have, carry 30,000 genes. They consist of around 3.5 billion DNA base pairs that contain the information to build a Tasmanian tiger and keep it alive. Analyzing every single gene of the Tasmanian tiger, from degraded tissue samples over 100 years old, is an extreme scientific challenge.
Building any mammalian genome is really challenging, and that's because our genomes are about 3 billion letters of code long, so they're absolutely enormous. But then we have an extra level of challenge when we come to try and do it from an extinct animal where we've got degraded DNA.
Andrew and the team are using supercomputers to help them solve this mind-bogglingly difficult jigsaw puzzle. Finally, a genetic blueprint is emerging.
With the thylacine genome, we have probably the best build for an extinct animal genome that's out there today.
But one of the biggest hurdles is to take an extinct genome and turn it into a living thing.
Morning, guys.
For this radical transformation, they need a cell donor. Axel Newton leads a team in the laboratory where an unlikely creature could hold the key to resurrecting the Tasmanian tiger.
You sort of invert them, flip them on their backs, and then this is their pouch here. Very, very nice temperament. Inquisitive.
This is a fat-tailed Dunnart, a mouse-like marsupial.
These ones are way more energetic, so this could be a bit more challenging. Sometimes you have to be careful with this as well, because they will actually run up your sleeve and try and escape.
The fat-tailed Dunnart looks about as far from the Tasmanian tiger as you could get. But it's also a marsupial carnivore and has a very similar genome.
These guys have a similar number of chromosomes, so the DNA of these, even though very, very small little marsupials, is actually quite similar to that of the extinct Tasmanian tiger. If we look at some of their features, they have sharp, pointy teeth, they have these very carnivorous features. If these were way, way bigger, we would probably be running away from them. They're little tiny predators.
Andrew Pask plans to take a Dunart stem cell and replace its DNA with Tasmanian tiger DNA.
We're going to edit its genome to turn it basically into a Tasmanian tiger cell. One of the things that we still can't do with de-extinction science is actually create life where there is none. So we can't sort of, Frankenstein, lightning bolt, hit a dead thylacine cell and bring it back to life. That doesn't work. We're always going to be starting off with a living cell from a close relative of the animal that went extinct. And then we're engineering that cell to turn it from whichever species that is into our extinct animals. So we're literally changing it chromosome by chromosome into a thylacine.
The team doesn't have living cells from a Tasmanian tiger, but the Dunart, as one of the closest living relatives, shares many of its genes. The team plans to take cells from the Dunart and edit their chromosomes. Using molecular scissors, they will remove some Dunart DNA and replace it with genes from the Tasmanian tiger. They plan to turn these modified cells into embryos, which they can grow in a host animal or an artificial womb. And hopefully, a few weeks later, a Tasmanian tiger baby will be born, the first in nearly a century. Andrew and Axel take a gene from the 113-year-old preserved Tasmanian tiger and splice it into a mouse genome. This might sound like science fiction, but it's already science fact.
These are looking really good. Have a look. Oh, wow. Here we go. I do love it.
This is the face of de-extinction.
Have a look at that.
Lots of blue in the face.
Oh, fantastic.
They add a blue color tag to the Tasmanian tiger gene.
We've got lots of expression in the developing skull, which is really fantastic.
As the embryo begins to develop, the Tasmanian tiger gene reveals itself.
Looks like we've also got some maybe in the limbs as well, and maybe also in the spine there as well.
The mouse is filled with blue-green tissue, actual Tasmanian tiger.
Lots
Wow.
around the eye. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's looking really, really great. I love looking at these embryos every time we've got one because each one represents a piece of the Tasmanian tiger genome that we've essentially brought back to life.
The prospect of bringing back an extinct animal raises serious ethical concerns. From the creation of hybrid embryos to the welfare of any newly cloned animal. But for Andrew, it's a noble ambition that is tantalizingly close.
It's been something from the very beginning of my career that I've pursued at every single level. I just absolutely love this animal. I feel really driven by the fact that we wiped it off the face of the earth and that we now actually really do have the tools in place to restore this animal and to bring it back.
If Andrew is successful, this could be the beginning of a whole new chapter for the Tasmanian tiger. For over 2 million years, this extraordinary animal had the run of an entire continent. And then, in a blink of an eye, it was gone.
This predator, this thylacine, was probably, ruling the roost in these forests for some time, for hundreds of thousands of years. It's heartbreaking to think that that long history of this beautiful animal was cut short through to our own actions. I think that's a really hard pill to swallow, but also a powerful lesson.
It's an extinction that haunts us still.
I think this extinction is one of the most tragic extinctions because it's an extinction that we witnessed as a species. This was not even 100 years ago that this entire species went extinct. And it didn't quietly go extinct off in some corner of a jungle somewhere where nobody could notice. There was literally one last remaining Tasmanian tiger in one single zoo in Tasmania. And once it departed, the whole lineage was gone, and that played out in front of human eyes.
When the last Tasmanian tiger died in Hobart Zoo, it was the end of the line, not just for one species, but an entire family.
The whole thylacine family was reduced down to a single species surviving on one island when the Europeans arrived and basically snuffed out 25 million years of vertebrate evolution.
But today, maybe there's a new history in the making. And one not only for the Tasmanian tiger.
On a global scale, de-extinction science offers now a technology to correct some of these terrible wrongs that have been done, some of these amazing, beautiful species that have been wiped from the planet, and that we may now have a technology where we can recreate and bring back some of those really, really important and iconic species.
The story of the Tasmanian tiger is one of a reimagined future. Not only for one species, but for many. Until then, we can only remember the extraordinary lost beast that was the Tasmanian tiger.